I call to order the City Commission meeting Thursday, June 6th in Commission Chambers of Municipal and Safety Building. Tonight we have for our invocation Pastor Terry Phillips from the Bread of Life Ministries. If you'll stand for that and remain standing for the pledge.
Thank you, Matt. Father, we just want to come to you tonight to thank you for this opportunity to bring the invocation before this assembly and this commission tonight. And Father, we want to, since it is the invocation, we want to invoke, we want to beseech, we want to pray that your will be done in everything that's said and done in this meeting tonight. We ask, oh God, that you'll be with each commissioner, Father God, as they make decisions tonight that will affect the citizens of this great city. We ask, oh God, that you'll give them wisdom and insight, Father God, to help them to realize that every decision they make affects the citizens. It affects those of us who live, work, and worship in this great city. And Father, I pray that your will be done, that they will hear your voice and hear your words, and that the Spirit of the living God will come upon them, Father God, that they might know what is your will and what is your divine plan for this city as it goes forth. So, Father, we thank you tonight for the opportunity to pray, and we thank you, Lord, as your word tells us in Psalms chapter 6 and verse 9, that you have heard our supplication and that you have received our prayer. And we thank you for that in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, Mayor. The first order of business is to consider approval of the minutes for the regularly scheduled City Commission meeting held on Thursday, May 16th, 2024.
Do I have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock.
Abstain, I was not present.
Commissioner Hunter.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy.
Abstain, I wasn't present.
Mayor Fowler.
Yes.
Mayor, the next order of business is under proclamations, resolutions, and presentation. And the first one is a presentation of a Patriot Award. And I will come down, and if you gentlemen will come and meet me, that would be very nice.
I'm Jerry Bush. I'm the area chair of the Employer Support of the Garden Reserve of Northeast Tennessee. With me tonight is Don Grindstaff, a committee member of the Employees Support of the Garden Reserve. Tonight we want to present an award to Cathy Ball, the city manager, and she was nominated by Mitchell Watson, the attorney, I think, here at the city. Blake. All right. Well, the Patriot Award is one level of awards that can be given by the Employer Support of the Garden Reserve. We're a national organization. We came into existence in 1972 when the military draft went away. That's when ESGR came into existence. And our mission really is threefold. We want to educate both service members and people, employers who employ the garden reservists. We want to recognize employers and organizations that support their garden reservists while they're serving on active duty. And then the third leg of our organization is our ombudsman, who mitigates situations when it involves conflicts between employers who are members of the Garden Reserve and their employer. Just as a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of USERRA? All right, USERRA is the Uniformed Services Employments and Reemployment Rights Act that was implemented in Congress in 1994 by Richard Nixon. But this is what protects our service members while they're serving away from their jobs and gives them protections when they come back from service. But one of the things we do is recognize. And so tonight we want to recognize Cathy Ball for her support of Blake One of the things he wrote in his recommendation for this award was that she never asked, what are we going to do when you're gone? She said, how can I help you when you are gone? How can we support your family? And he just had many good things to say about Cathy and her and the support of the city of Johnson City whenever he's activated in a way. Blake is a captain in the 278th Armored Cav. It's one of the biggest organizations of the Guard in the state of Tennessee. They have over 5,000 members across the state of Tennessee. So 278th is a big part of that. So at this time, I'd like to present Cathy with this award. It's called the Patriot Award, and it's one of the levels that we can present to individuals. We have awards that go from the Seven Seals Award to the Above and Beyond Award to the Patriot Award. That's the highest award in the state of Tennessee. And then at the national level, you can receive up to what's called the Secretary of Defense Employer National Freedom Award. So Tennessee is one of the most active charter state organizations that supports the ESGR. So Cathy? Thank you so much for your...
Well, I want to say a huge thank you. I'm glad that your organization exists and that it's here to support folks that we have that serve in the reservist. I want to point out, I think it feels a little bit hypocritical for me to receive this award because the real heroes are the ones who are going to do this reserve duty. We have 17 people in the city of Johnson City that serve as reservists within our community. We have I think 15 in the police department and then 2 in the fire department. And we're honored to have them and be able to have them serve our country in this way. Your support for them, us supporting them while they're gone, means that we feel safe and that we feel like our country is protected. I think they're the real heroes. And thank you for your service. Among that, we've had so many other people who've served in the military and have protected this country. I thank you for this, and I will honor and treasure it, and I will have it. But I have to tell you, I think the real heroes are those that are serving.
One of the other things that we do is the signing of what's called a statement of support for the Guard and Reserve Forces of the United States of America. It just simply says that the city of Johnson City supports that mission of the United States military, and that's called what's called a statement of support. So I'll leave that with you to sign and display. One other thing that Cathy doesn't know about is one of the things we do in ESGR is we have boss lifts. Now, boss lift is where we ask Cathy, would she like to go down to McGee Tyson Air Force Base, get on board a KC-135 refueler, and go up to 35,000 feet and refuel aircraft?
I think that fits the definition of go all out. And absolutely, that would be my honor.
That'll be on September the 12th, and I'll be getting with Cathy to arrange for her to go down to take a most unusual flight. And it's a unique experience, let me tell you. Unique.
You didn't tell me about this part.
No, I wanted to surprise you, but it's a unique experience.
Thank you.
I'll be in contact.
I feel so honored, and thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank you.
Mayor, the mayor's now going to do a present a proclamation recognizing June 21st, 2024 as Ask Day, A-S-K Day.
This is for whereas the epidemic of gun violence is plaguing our nation's children and claiming 5 lives a day, and whereas gun violence is the leading cause of death among children and teens in the United States and in Tennessee, and whereas the Asking Saves Kids campaign encourages parents to add 1 or more safety questions to conversations before their child visits other houses. Is there an unlocked gun in your home? Question. And whereas asking this question before sending your child to another home could save your child's life. And whereas the hope is that asking will become a routine health and safety question, offering a real immediate solution that all Americans can adopt to help protect their families and children from injury and death. And whereas the power of the Ask campaign is that it brings together all Americans concerned with the welfare of children, including gun owners, and makes the solution to gun violence a discussion about public safety and good parenting. And whereas the first day of summer, the season in which children and teens typically spend more time at the homes of friends and family, is designated as National Ask Day. And whereas the Washington County, Tennessee chapter of Brady Against Gun Violence invites all residents of Johnson City to participate in Ask Day. Now therefore, I, Todd Fowler, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim June 21st, 2024 as Ask Day in Johnson City, Tennessee, and encourage fellow citizens to remain vigilant in the safety of our children and families. Glad to have you here.
Mike and I co-chair the Brady chapter, the only Brady chapter, in fact, in Tennessee. And our aim is for responsible gun ownership. We are not about taking people's guns away. We make that very clear, but we are about responsible gun ownership. And we have an event coming up on Ask Day at the senior center, at the community center, and we'd love to have you all come out. It's a Friday. It's 10:30 to 1. The first part is a panel discussion about legislation regarding gun ownership, and we have some experts. We have representatives from moms. We have representatives from the Family Justice Center. We have a lot of folks coming out to make this a special day. Then we have a box lunch. And with that, we have a speaker from the Veterans Administration, and she is a trainer. She goes all over the state training on suicide prevention. So she is going to do her presentation. So 10:30 to 1, June 21st, Ask Day. Hope you'll come. You need to register with the community center, and the box lunch is $3. Good deal. Thank you.
I just want to say one quick story. None of us are immune from this sort of thing. A couple of years ago, long before I got involved in Brady, my son borrowed my truck for a camping trip. He and his wife went on a camping trip, and they got to where they were going, and they sent me a picture of a gun, of a pistol I had under the seat I forgot to take out. And that just froze my heart. So I took care of that. But I'm just saying that if you look at statistics, 1,500 guns are stolen every month in the state of Tennessee, stolen, usually in Nashville and Memphis. But then the children get a hold of those because they're not secured, and firearms are the #1 cause of death for our children. So this is a serious topic, and we're so glad you support us. Thank you so much. And come out to Ask Day and make it a success and save some lives.
My name is Herman Garcia, and I am very honored to be here to help you guys understand a little bit about what we're trying to do as a Brady group. As Carol said, we're not here to try to take anybody's guns away. All we're trying to do is ask about sensible gun ownership, and maybe by doing that, we might be able to save some lives, save some children, because that's the most important thing that we want to do, is be active in our community to try to save the most precious things we have is our children. So hopefully some of you will come out, support us, and ask, what can I do to help, and maybe come out to some of our meetings, monthly meetings. All right, be a Brady member.
Brady. Sorry. Can you hear me? My name's Diane Bradley Harden, and I'm a proud Washington County Brady Group member. And I also want us to add, we do give out free gun locks to people who want those. We'll be giving them out at each event that we have. And a lot of people don't even think about locking their guns and what that means if they have children in the house. A lot of people don't even hide their guns. But we give those away free to the community, so anyone who's interested can contact us and support us. And I'll reiterate, we are looking for members and we do not want to take anyone's guns away, although we've been accused of that. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment, always have been. Anyone who wants guns should have them, and we all agree with that. So, but we do believe in protecting children. That's our number one goal, because there's so many children that get killed unnecessarily, and so many people, like Carol said and Mike said, steal guns, and then they go out and they commit crimes. So there's no reason for that, and gun safety is our number one goal. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
As the mayor is making his way back up, the next item on our agenda is public comment. We received two citizens who have signed up to speak under public comment. Both of these are under or regarding ordinance 4881-24, the Princeton Road rezoning. And Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
So I will open the public hearing. It's a public comment. In just a minute, what I'll tell you is just say your name again when you come up, and you've got 3 minutes to talk. And Regina Guess is the first.
Hello, good evening. I'm Regina Guess. I live at 2210 Lakeland Drive. I assume you guys are aware of me. I've been here at every meeting representing my neighborhood. Also want you to be aware that we are still not in favor of this. Also, I want to remind you there's been that we all signed a statement saying we don't want it. I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that, and I want you to make sure you think about this and open your hearts to let you know that we are not in favor of this, that we have a neighborhood that we want to consistently become and stay the neighborhood it is. We have lots of people in our neighborhood that are not able to come tonight, but we are here representing the ones that can be here. The concerns, as you all are aware, that the precautions in regards to traffic control, and as you guys all know, we are a cut-through. We've been a cut-through for years, and that is a big issue. That's why we got speed bumps in our neighborhood. I mean, if we didn't want to control it, we wouldn't have done that then. So we are still having that issue with that, despite what the city's attempt to put the little markers up and tell us there's only 9 people that come through our neighborhood during that time is really ridiculous. I hate to tell them that was absurd, because I walk my dog every morning from 6 to 6:30, and I count 4 cut-throughs in the morning just when I'm walking my dog, okay? Not counting when I walk my dog in the evening from 7 to 9. So I can pretty well tell you we have a lot more cut-through than 9 people, since there's 2 people in my own direct family that goes out that direction, and the other 3 go the other direction. So I'm looking at each one of you tonight to let you know we are not in favor. Can we come up with another plan for our neighborhood? Dig deep into your hearts. We are a family neighborhood. We want to keep it that way. That's why we live where we live. And I want to remind you guys, we want you to represent us. We want that, and we want what's going to be the best thing for our neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
And next is Steve Hunt. We won't start till you get up here.
I'll try to be short and sweet on this. My name is Steve Hunt. I live at 2217 Kipping Street. I've been there almost 40 years. and I've been at all the meetings, just like Regina. Anyhow, in an attempt to summarize the first two meetings, I will try to do so now. At the first meeting, there was a vote of 3 yes and 2 no to approve the rezoning request, with 3 or more commissioners expressing concern over a number of proposed concept plan issues. Prior to the vote, I believe several statements were made by 1 or more commissioners. 1, we are being asked about land use. 2, the lane we are trying to find is a place that makes the most sense and does the least harm. And 3, that there is some value in knowing what you have. To me, these seem to make good sense, but then conflicted with the resulting of the rezoning vote at the first meeting, where 3 or more commissioners had also expressed their concern over a number of issues, especially questionable parking, space limitations, and safety. This 3-2 vote was also possibly based on the 5 points of the Planning Commission's recommendations to rezone. However, these 5 points themselves could be debated based on what little is actually known about this project, even after 4 revisions to the concept plan. The recommendations seem to more focused on the history of the current zoning status as opposed to resolving neighborhood questions and concerns, which are as follows. Questionable entrance and exit location on Nave, increased traffic and legitimacy of the analysis, keeping in mind that we recently had traffic speed bumps installed in the neighborhood at the request of approximately 150 out of 125 voting property owners. Okay, parking and overflow parking into Nave was another issue. Number of units, fire truck accessibility and maneuverability, especially around various types of vehicles in the parking lot at any time of day and night. Price of units and effect on the value of surrounding property, operation of the development, effect on the character of surrounding neighborhood, trash generated during and after completion, effect on the adjoining existing stream and wetland areas, little green space and no playground on premise for children, construction and noise of building process, and distrust of the developer. We really don't know for sure what we have in this housing project. As of the moment, there appears to be no well thought out final concept plan that can respond to these questions and concerns. The big question is why even consider a request to rezone for an unknown goal when so many neighborhood residents are concerned or opposed. What we do know, though, is that there is an existing concept plan that still appears to be rife with the parking, safety, and flooding concerns expressed by Commissioner Fowler at the first commission meeting. We in the neighborhood are the ones that will have to live with your decisions on a daily basis, not you. We are also the tax-paying voters of the neighborhood. Please acknowledge and heed our concerns and fears by voting no to the rezoning proposal. To vote yes, you are forcing an unnecessary fit and going against the wishes of your constituents. Thank you. I get it.
Thank you. Ms. Ball.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners, the next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
All right, I will start with my left today, John.
6.1.10
6.1.10,
and 624.
624. All right.
6.1.4, just for an overview of the action plan, so the public can understand that.
Anything else? All right, Joe?
Everything. Here.
They pull the ones I want.
All right, so those are the ones, so we'll start with 6.1.4.
And 6.1.4, I'll ask Wayne Lyons if he will come up, our CDBG Community Development Block Grant Coordinator. And this item is to consider approval of the FY 24-25 Housing and Urban Development Annual Action Plan. And I think Commissioner Brock, you just wanted an explanation of that?
Mr. Lyons, if you could, first of all, just address the categories of where the money will be assigned and spent, and then just maybe just a general overview of what we hope to achieve this year using the federal CDBG funds.
All right, so this year in our annual action plan, of course, it's a rather lengthy document. Summarizes the goals of the city and how we want to utilize these funds we receive from the state. So this year, what those funds are going towards, our total allocation is $615,512, primarily going towards housing rehabilitation and reconstruction projects. So those are being conducted by First Tennessee Development District, Appalachia Service Project, Habitat for Humanity, as well as there's a duplex unit that's going to be built by Eastern 8 Community Development Corporation. So overall, I believe there's approximately 8 homes that'll be affected just by First Tennessee Development District with this plan. It's rehab projects, so it's different projects. It's roofing, HVAC, different projects with the home to where the homeowner can't afford to make the necessary rehabilitation to the home to get it back up to code and in a livable environment. And then the same thing can be said with ASP and Habitat for Humanity, similar projects, whereas theirs are going to lean more towards reconstructions. And those are partial funding, of course, $60,000 won't reconstruct the home, but it goes towards the project as a whole, and they have funding from other sources to do the rest. And then retail housing development for Eastern 8, that one is for the one duplex.
On the Bright Ridge Board, they have they still have a weather, kind of weatherization program that they go in. Do you work with them at all? When I was on the board, I know it was really a big thing. They could spend almost up to like $5,000 per unit just helping with windows and HVAC and all those kind of things. It sounds like some kind of partnership with referral might be in order to really expand the money that's being used in the community to help upgrade really, really needed houses. I think particularly on the weather issue, we have a lot of people who pay very high electric bills because in the wintertime they're heating just cold air that continues to come into the home. So if you haven't talked to them, I think that's probably a good idea to see how we can really make an impact across the city.
Of course, yeah. I'm not currently in conversations with him, but over the next years, we've discussed with the administration that we're looking for better partnerships and ways we can make this money go a lot further. So that's definitely one option.
Mr. Hunter can give you some good
Yeah.
contacts.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons.
6.1.10.
The next item is 6.110, and I think Stephanie Laus, our finance director, is going to go over this. This is to consider approval of the comptroller calculation of certified tax rates. Ms. Laus has prepared a presentation,
Just a little bit of information.
some information.
I wish we'd written down our guesses.
To be able to explain, as you're aware, Johnson City is in 3 different counties. And so this rate, there's a rate that the state provides us for those, and they are different in different counties depending on when their reappraisals are done.
Yes.
But Ms. Laus will explain that in a lot further detail.
So just to give you a little bit of background about it, the city of Johnson City is one of the localities in Tennessee that is a multi-county jurisdiction. So we have 3 counties that our city entails. Each of those 3 counties reappraise at different times. Washington County reappraised this year in 2024. Carter and Sullivan, the last time that they reappraised was 2021. Carter will reappraise in '26, and Sullivan will reappraise next year. So this is going to be a 3 years in a row type of thing. During a reappraisal in a multi-county jurisdiction, the State Board of Equalization requires that we equalize our tax rates, and that is to maintain a uniform tax calculation across all counties, not just the county that reappraised. They've approved a procedure back in 1989 that all multi-county jurisdictions are to use for this calculation, and actually the comptroller performs the calculation for us, sends it to us, and then we just look over it and review it. So these are the certified tax rates that they came up with for us for this year. Washington County $1.35, Carter $1.88, and Sullivan $2.02, and those are out to 4 decimals because we are required to take the rates out to 4 decimals. Tax bills will still only be to the dollar. There are several pieces that go into calculating these rates, but the biggest one that I'll explain is the appraisal ratio. And the appraisal ratio is basically deciding what percentage of the market value your property is currently appraised at. So for Washington County, when they reappraised this year, they reappraised to the market value that they currently are. So if you have a $500,000 house in Washington County, it appraised at $500,000, market value is $500, its appraisal ratio is 1.0. Versus Sullivan and Carter that reappraised in 2021, back when the prices were lower, and we know the market has skyrocketed. So if you had a house there that it appraised at $350,000 in 2021, but the current market value is $500,000, that changes your appraisal ratio to 0.7. And that plays into the calculations the biggest way. So this is how the state comptroller calculates it. And I tried to break it down piece by piece because it's not an easy calculation and an easy thing to understand. So what they do is, the first thing they have to do is to bring our property assessments up to market for all counties. Washington's already at county. They are out at market because they reassessed. The other two counties have to be brought up to market. The way that they do that is they take the current assessed value and they divide it by the appraisal ratio. And that's going to bring your property values up to approximately market rate. Then they're going to take that and divide it by the prior year tax levy, because what you're trying to do is to stay at what you made in taxes the previous year. You can't make more, they want to keep you at the same rate. And that's how they come up with this overall tax rate equivalent. That is the rate that will get us to the total tax revenue that we received last year with these equalized assessments. From that, then they have to bring those appraisal ratios back into play and divide the tax rate that it calculated, this overall, and apply the appraisal ratio to it again. Divide the rate by the appraisal ratio. And that is to determine what rate needs to be set in each county based on their specific assessment that's been equalized. And that's where it comes up with Washington County is right at the 135 because they were a 1.0 appraisal ratio. They're at market value. Everybody else, because they are lower than market value with their assessments, their rates went up. Basically, the lower the appraisal ratio, the higher the tax rate has to be in order to equalize.
And how many more dollars will we collect this year than last because of all of that?
None.
That's right.
That's why it's called equalization.
So what we're really talking about is there is a pie. Because y'all are looking glassy-eyed and I'm concerned. There is a pie.
Believe me.
Okay, and every year that pie is the same size unless we tell you we're making the pie bigger, which we're not telling you. And so what this is doing is figuring out how the pie gets sliced. Pie isn't any bigger, we're just slicing the pie. And so when this happened 10 years ago, commercial appraisals were through the roof, and if you remember, the economy had suffered, home appraisals had gone in the tank, and the reappraisal a decade ago really kind of, the pie noticeably shifted in the sizes of the pieces of the pie, those two kinds of property ownership shared. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it is. It's very complicated.
And there are people in Nashville who will talk to you all day about this, and they never wear out.
Well, and we'll be talking about it next year and the year after.
Yeah,
Because they all three. Mm-hmm.
Now, what do we say to citizens when they see the three different tax rates? Like Sullivan County being $2.03 basically versus our 134. One of the things that does concern me as a city commissioner is like, oh, you raised our tax rate out in Sullivan County, but look what you're doing to Washington to your own group. I mean, you've really lowered theirs. So there is a lot of misconception about what those tax rates do, but in the end, they equalize out.
And what I would say is that to Carter and Sullivan County is that their assessments did not increase the way that Washington County's assessments increased. So when their appraisals stayed down where they were last year, whereas Washington County's appraisals all went significantly higher.
When everybody got their tax assessment letters a couple of weeks ago, the average across the board was about a 68% increase
Yes.
in the assessed value of the properties.
And Carter and Sullivan did not see that, so that's why that rate.
For people whose home appraised higher than that, might they see some additional taxes?
So anyone whose home value increased by that average rate, that 60 to 68%, they're not going to see a raise in taxes. Their taxes are going to remain relatively the same. If your home went higher, if you had a 70, 80, 90% increase in the value of your home, then your taxes are going to increase. They're not going to increase 70%. They're going to increase the difference between that average increase and what yours did.
And the city of Johnson City does none of the assessments. It's all the county that comes in and assesses, so we don't have anything to do with the assessment of the value.
Exactly. The county assessor does all that. And I will say that the front desk downstairs, they have a great pamphlet that the county assessor put together about this, specifically because they knew the rates were, or the assessments were going to increase, and he's done a really good job of explaining how that works and what happens. So I'm happy to share that with anybody who would be interested.
And we're gonna be reviewing our budget for next year at tonight's meeting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And there is no tax increase that you're recommending.
Correct.
In that budget for 2025.
Any more questions?
Thank you. Thanks.
The next item I think that was requested information on was item 6.2.4. That was the Baker Construction Services rock blasting project. And we have Mr. Best, the Assistant Public Works Director, here to discuss this. It looks like our Public Works Director, Jason Miles, is going to talk about it as well.
Just for the general public, whenever we're talking rock blasting, I'd just like for us to be specific and transparent as where that's going to be and when we might expect it.
Sure. So we put that out to bid. This is for the West Oakland project, West Oakland Avenue. We may recall that we had to stop construction because the rock hammer that we had rented was just bouncing off the rock. It was just too hard to deal with that particular rock hammer. So we regrouped, put the project out to bid, and these are the bids that we got. Only one, unfortunately, but for $331,000 plus, contingency and some minor items. So $400,000 is what we're asking for, not to exceed. Andy, if you have some details you want to add about when the construction will start?
So if you approve this tonight, we'll go through and get their insurance, so that'll take a little while just to confirm that and go through that process. But once we give them a notice to proceed, they'll come up with a blasting plan. We're hoping we can do it in 2 phases, or or maybe 3. We may have to go down Denny Mill a little bit after we start excavating out Oakland. We're hoping to blast where we're working now, so we can get the road through there, and then once the bridge gets built, move the road over and use Oakland. That's kind of the plan. But we got them to develop the blasting plan. They were concerned about how close they could get to the road without interrupting it, without lifting it. So once they actually do some exploratory drilling, they can determine how close and what they can blast. And we're hopeful that it won't close Oakland down.
Mr. Best, how do you communicate with residents in that area to let them know where it's going to be exactly relative to their property and what they can expect?
In our specs, everyone within so many feet, I'm thinking if it was 400 or 500, the blaster said they'd actually go further.
Great.
They'll go out and do a pre-blast inspection of every home that may be affected by it. And then we have sound levels and lots of things within our specs that are state, kind of state specs. So the blaster should be reaching out to everybody that would be or could be affected by the blasting.
I know this is maybe a crazy question, but I'm on the Animal Control Board. Do they talk to the residents about maybe taking their pets somewhere else on those days?
Well, we definitely can put out a news release of when, it should be happening starting on this date. So yes, we can definitely try to get that information out to citizens in the area.
Appreciate it, thanks.
That's all.
Anything else? Any other questions? I think we're good. Thank
I
you.
move approval on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioners, the next order of business is consideration of ordinances under first reading. The first item is 7.1. This is ordinance number 4884-24. Is an ordinance conveying a certain parcel of property owned by the City of Johnson City to Bluff City Volunteer Fire Department at parcel 112-053.20 in Sullivan County. And we have Director Witherspoon here to bring this item forward.
As explained in the packet, this was a parcel and a building that came over when we acquired the Chinkapin Water Utility District. It is probably closer to the city of Bristol than it is the city of Johnson City. It's at the very extreme end of our system. It's not useful for our system. It hasn't been used other than to pile rock, gravel up for repairs or construction. It's also directly across from a large church that's up there, and so Bluff City Volunteer approached us about acquiring that and utilizing it for one of their fire stations. We would recommend it. We have no further use for the property, and we had it appraised by Dun & Metz out of Knoxville. They agreed to pay the appraised value, so we'd recommend approval.
Move approval.
Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Commission, the next order of business is ordinance number 4887-24. This is an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City by changing from I-1 district to B4 for property located at 0 Wayfield Drive. And we have our Development Services Director, Ms. Pudney, here to bring this, to discuss this item.
Development coordinator, but I like the sound of the director too.
It sounded like a promotion. Just happened there.
You're on tape.
Mayor Fowler, Vice Mayor Murphy, Commissioners, thank you for having me tonight. This is a rezoning request, as previously stated, on Wayfield Drive from I-1 light industrial to B4 commercial. The request is to rezone the subject property, which is roughly 18 acres, to allow for development of a zoning. We're calling it a campground recreational, but the applicant has requested that we call it glamping because it's a higher end campground with cabins.
So are
yurts,
we using
geodomes.
that terminology in our code?
The code is campground.
Okay.
So
But we're
that's-
gonna call it something else.
It's going to remain campground in
Okay.
the thing, but they just wanted to kind of reiterate the higher end cabins, geodomes, kind of in RV areas that they will be requesting. So currently the property is vacant, and the future land use map calls for it to be commercial with some high density residential in the rear. The proposed B4 zone, and this is along the Bristol Highway, encourages commercial development along major highway corridors where the principal uses of land are devoted to commercial establishments which cater to motor vehicles and oriented trades and services. So their plan is to have 5 RV campsites, RV pads, and 23 buildings that consist of tiny cabins, geodomes, kind of small camp, what you see at a small campground. The location of the proposed zoning, like previously stated, is off the commercial corridor of Bristol Highway and borders an existing B4 zone, so it's just a continuation of that commercial zoning. This will extend that and transition from B4 to R5 high density, R3, which is medium density residential, and then agriculture A1 on the back of the property. These are just some aerials of the property to understand. Most of it's highly undevelopable for anything besides what they're wanting to use it for. This is an aerial to kind of show that topography. It kind of sits in, and then the campground will kind of just weave in and out on the property front here. And this is looking at the street where the entrance would be. The RV pads would be here, and they'd cross the creek to get to your cabins and geodomes. The site plan or the concept plan that you received in your packet has been updated to kind of this view. And I want to mention with the B4 zoning, a concept plan is not required nor binding. So this plan that you have here and in your packets is not a binding concept plan. By rezoning it to B4, they would be permitted any use within that B4 district, and staff agrees that that is a reasonable request since it's just a continuation of that B4. But as stated previously, the 5 RV concrete pads here, the parking here, and some geodomes yurts. They had more tents throughout the site, but they're only now proposing 3 tents to really bring that more upscale camping experience. There's a bridge that crosses the creek where they have had a structural engineer come out to look at the integrity of that bridge for emergency vehicles. And I have a slide further down, but that engineer believes that that bridge is structurally safe for emergency vehicles, especially truck 4 for the fire department, which is that ladder truck. And no recreational vehicles, like your regular cars that will come in, will actually be crossing that bridge. They'll be using golf carts to kind of bring people from parking into the actual development area. These are not exact, but they were provided by the petitioner of kind of the examples that they're using for the tiny cabins and the geodome yurts that they would be imposing on the property. So kind of your upscale 2-week kind of or less camping. It's not going to be a long-term camped-style campground. Just a little comparison to what it's currently zoned is I-1, and that allows some limited commercial uses such as dry cleaning, offices, mini storage, and parking lots. B4, which allows the amusements and recreation, also allows some light manufacturing, and then restaurants, parking lots, garages, and retail as well. So it's very similar uses, just allows for the recreational use that's being requested. Water and sewer are available for the proposed development. The camping structures, i.e. the buildings and the geoderms, will not be located on any of those utility easements or water and sewer lines. In regards to traffic, city engineers did not request a traffic study for the property, and it did not request any improvements to the entrance or exit of the proposed development. And I believe Anthony Todd is here too as well to kind of discuss if you have any questions regarding those markers and triggers for a traffic study, but one was not requested or conducted. Going back to the bridge, this is the conclusion from the engineer, and I highlighted his conclusion and opinion for you, where it basically just states the bridge is sufficient to carry the structural load of the trucks for emergency vehicles, and that's just a photo of the bridge to show that its structural integrity. And that entire report we do have that entire report for review as well.
Ms. President, will they be required to upgrade that bridge to put sides on it?
No, that's how bridges are in glamping settings. That's what makes it glamping.
Or is it, you can dive off and swim in the creek?
So we don't have any requirements for it. That might come up during the building code for any building permits, but I would venture to say there wouldn't be any improvements since none were recommended from the report.
So what's the origin of that bridge? I mean, what?
1902.
I mean, do we know? Well, why is it there? I mean, what was its original intent?
I may have Public Works, if
They logged.
Wallace, if Wallace wants to come up and kind of talk about that bridge.
It sounds like
He
nobody's
doesn't seem
sure.
like he
Everybody's
wants to
shaking
come
their
up here.
heads.
Public Works had them look into the structural integrity of the bridge, so
Well, I
that's
guess I'm
why
just more like, how did it come to be there?
I'm
What
not
was
sure
its
any of
use?
us know. Does anybody know?
It goes
Nope,
somewhere.
don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I bet they logged them.
Would there have been a neighborhood? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
There you go.
There was a neighborhood meeting held on May 8th at 5 p.m. and one individual attended, and their concern was just the safety of the additional traffic coming onto Bristol Highway that would be generated from the new development. And the Planning Commission heard it on May 14th and unanimously approved to rezone the property to B4.
I'm assuming there's a decel lane to turn on to Wayfield off the Bristol Highway. Is that
Called the
correct?
median or
A
the
deceleration
shoulder.
lane?
I think it's a shoulder,
Yeah.
but I'm not.
It's a shoulder and a prayer.
I mean, you're gonna have glampers that are probably gonna be 45 feet long, so some of them, to be able to turn right there or
Yes,
left.
and there is a shoulder there, so they have enough room they can pull over on the shoulder. as
But
they
then
go.
coming the other way, they'd have to get into
The turn lane.
Yes. Thank you.
So with that, staff recommends approval of the rezoning to B4 since it would not have an unreasonable impact on the surrounding community as it abuts an existing B4 district along a major corridor. And by approving the B4 rezoning, not only, even if this concept plan, if they decide to do something else, it's all uses in the B4 as well as this campground fit within the permitted uses and maximizes the land.
Is there any room for their expansion or anything? It looks like they've kind of cut it back a bit, but it's pretty elevated behind there.
Yes, ma'am. They they have cut back a little bit on the types of camping that they would be providing. There was maybe 10, 15 tent areas that they were proposing, but now they only have 3 and still maintaining the 23 cabin and geodome yurt building. So they're not wanting to really move a lot of dirt, or they want to work within the existing nature of the
But if they
building.
wanted to add some, this rezoning, they could just go ahead and do that later.
Through zoning and permitting, yes.
I'd move approval on first reading.
Second. We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item for consideration is item 7.3. This is ordinance 4888-24. This is the first reading and public hearing because it is consideration of the budget, the annual budget. It's an ordinance to establish the property tax rate, appropriate funds, and adopt a budget for the fiscal year July 1, 2024 to June 30, 2025. And I'm going to step down along with Dustin, and we are going to provide this presentation to you. So, thank you again. As you all know, this, every year at this time, we provide you with an annual budget, and I think y'all have talked tonight about the fact that what you see is we're not proposing any tax increase. We like to be able to run through what we prioritize, what we recommend to you all as part of this budget. Again, this is the first reading and the public hearing. So I am going to end up probably having to have some questions answered by Dustin. Our budget director, John Stedman, works in his office, along with Steve Willis, because you'll notice that some of the things that have increased are associated with our health insurance cost. So again, this is the timeline for the budget approval. You all know this timeline. This is a requirement that we have. So it's the first reading is today, and then we have the second reading. I will mention, and I'll mention at the end of the meeting, that this is a special called meeting because we have to have 3 readings in the month of June. This meeting is proposed to be at 1:30 on June 13th. And then we have the third reading, which will be June 20th at your regularly scheduled meeting. And then July 1 is when the budget will be implemented. So considerations, the first consideration in developing the budget is to align it with the commission's strategic goals. So the staff looks at those goals and looks at what we can do to meet those goals and then aligns the budget accordingly. The next consideration, as you'll see in another graph, is that the prior 3 or 4 years, we have seen sales tax increase really go up. And we saw that unexpectedly through COVID, and we'll be able to show that it is starting to slow down. We have, the budget office has done research in comparison to recommendations on what that number should be. And we can talk about that as we go through this presentation. We do have an increase in personnel cost. This includes having pay increases for employees that include both a cost of living and a merit increase in pay. It draws down a large unassigned fund balance for necessary capital equipment and projects. And if you remember, we only use fund balance or only associate it with one-time cost because we do not use reoccurring cost for unassigned fund balance. So priorities that we would consider putting into buckets this year for consideration is community safety. We have heard from the commission as well as our community that that is one of the most important items that we need to focus on. Core services, we've heard it several times in the work session. Future-ready infrastructure. We've made another top 20 list of the 15th quickest state that city that people are moving to. Employees, we continue to prioritize employees and in pay and in benefits. And then our investment in our school system, which is one of the best in the country. So let's first go to community safety and talk about what we are including funding within public safety area. By the end of this year, Commission approved 165 sworn officers. That went up by 11 this past year. Additional 10 for next year, which will bring us to the 175. And if you recall, we provided you with a graph that showed you that for the past 20 years, we're simply keeping up with population growth. And we had allowed those numbers to get lower than was recommended. Police vehicles are included within this budget. Police training, this is the same number that you've approved, so this number did not go up from last year, but it's a significant amount of money in training in police. Public safety improvements also include the relocation of the Family Justice Center. The money for that project is coming from funds that the city received from the opioid settlements. We have today received over $300,000 through those settlements. They continue to come in through chunks of money as agreements are made with different organizations that were required to pay into it. We are recommending adding an additional homeless coordinator, outreach coordinator. We provided you with details earlier this year demonstrating the success we've had with housing people through the one coordinator that was hired this past year. And so we're recommending adding a second person. We are in the process of completing and making available to the public for review a strategic plan for homelessness that should be available for public review in August of 2024. And then relocating the police evidence room. The money for doing this was budgeted in last year's budget. Simply, we're in the process of completing that transfer of materials. And we are doing that under an audit, so there will be an auditor who watches the whole process as the evidence is being transferred from the basement up to where the jail used to be located. These funds, we wanted to point out again that we're in the process, I would say this year, of completing projects. We received money from the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA funding, and we're in the process of completing those projects, which include $6 million for a fire training center. You've received updates on that training center. A commission approved a couple of months ago the design of a new Fire Station 4 relocation, which is beside of Topper Academy, so it will move across the street, and completing or doing upgrading the police training center. This would include improving the range conditions. So as you recall, under this ARPA funding, the requirements are that it has to be under contract by the end of this calendar year that we're in, 2024, and the funds have to be spent by the end of the calendar year of 2026. So core services. We have capital equipment of 2.7 million included in this. Capital projects of 2.7. This includes the commission chambers, Kiefhofer Farm, Carver Rec Center, HVAC, and then the Beeson Hall roof. These are basic improvements to those buildings. Additionally, that we will have some infrastructure improvements on Gray Station, Bobby Hicks intersection. We received a grant this year from the federal government of $1.7 million to upgrade that section of the roadway. And then we are adding another $200,000 in order to complete the project. The $200,000 is to do the design work associated with that project. We're adding downtown crosswalk lighting. Again, we have federal state money in the amount of $1 million for that project. And then we will supplement that with another $200,000 that will be used for design. Christian Church Road, and that is money from fund balance that will be used to do the design of that section of roadway. Employees. Again, we have continued, and today we heard presentations from other groups talking about the change in employee conditions since COVID. We continue to invest in our employees and in recruitment of these employees. A slide that we have later will talk about some increases that we have in healthcare cost. Our fund balance in healthcare has significantly gone down post-COVID, and we continue to try to build that balance back up so that we're able to provide good health benefits to our employees. We have 1.2 million in new positions. I will provide you a slide with those positions listed on there and highlight some of those positions. The additional money for employees includes, as I mentioned earlier, a 3% COLA increase as well as a 2% merit increase on average. And then last year, the commission mid-year approved the 11 additional sworn police officers. The remaining cost for that, in order to fully fund for 1 year, those employees is $900,000 for a total of $6 million. So I mentioned that the healthcare costs have continued to go up. We have seen 4 significant driving factors behind the increase in healthcare costs. There's been an escalation in cost. We heard from the Washington County Health Services of the Johnson City Medical Center in Franklin Woods that they've had their employees go from nurses from $17 an hour to $30 an hour. We're seeing more people who maybe put off going to the doctor during COVID and are now having more surgeries, more procedures. We have had a higher number of claims that are over $100,000. So unfortunately, we've had a higher number of folks, either family members or employees, with high-cost claims. The cost of the drug cost as a percentage of the healthcare cost has gone up significantly. I would say that before we would look at a 70-30 split of those costs, and now we're looking at prescription drugs making up about 50% of the cost of what we're paying out in healthcare.
Well, just for the public, it might be important to note that we self-insure, right? We're not like on the state plan or anything like that.
Yes, we have a pool of funds. We hold a fund balance and we draw from that until we reach a limit at which we have coverage. And we go to a third-party coverage on, but we hold those funds. And I'll talk about the fund balance as it relates to that. So
when
just
you
like we
say a
have
pool of funds, your graph would suggest you don't have a pool of funds.
That's exactly right. So if you look at this, I've got my arrow on 2018. It showed at that time that we had within this fund balance just for health insurance that we had over $7 million. You can see every year that has continued to decline. This year, we did increase employee contribution to this fund in order to try to balance it out. We try to have a split of 80-20 costs between the employer and the employee. And then we also are recommending moving 1.8 million from general fund, the city's general fund, which is a different fund balance than those funds just held for health insurance cost, in order to shore up this 475 or about $500,000 fund balance.
For those who are looking at this graph, is that downward trajectory the result of everybody's claims being a little bit more, or a few claims that are a lot more? Like what is the nature? You know, there's that, what's it called, stop loss, the insurance that's the over and above. But is this one or two claims every year that slowly erodes that, or is it just everybody's 10% more than they were last year?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. We're seeing an escalation in costs overall, as was shared with us by the ballot folks this afternoon. And then unfortunately for us, we've had about 17 claims that have exceeded that $100,000 limit, or $100,000 threshold, I should say, but they have not hit the $350,000 limit that we have whereby our stop loss would pick up. So all of those claims costs have hit these funds. And it's unfortunate we found ourselves there, but obviously we pride ourselves on having excellent health insurance for our employees and their families so that when those tragedies occur, they can get the care that they need.
And how many lives are we insuring on this plan?
We have in total about 2,800 insured lives.
So the 1.8 million would bump the fund balance up over 2 million from the 475, correct?
So the 1.8 is a product of increased city contributions to increase the revenue, if you will, going into the fund. And as Ms. Ball alluded to, we've also increased employee rates that will add to that revenue as well.
And that should at least address 2025?
Yes, ma'am. And we are also looking at plan design changes, and we're communicating that with employees as we speak. Melanie Rice and HR and her team, they're having employee meetings now. They started those a couple of weeks ago down in the transit department to talk about where we're at and what could be forthcoming perhaps in January. When you have plan design changes, oftentimes you're most beneficial and it has the least impact on employees if you do that based on the calendar year, not the physical year, because of the way the deductible program works.
I think our stop loss a number of years ago used to be around 250. We raised it to 350. Is that gap? I mean, we're not hitting that soon enough that we kind of got these folks in the middle that we're having to pay out of our fund balance.
Yeah, and on consent agenda tonight, you actually approved the stop loss renewal, and that was a flat renewal for the first time in more than 10 years. And we looked at that in terms of lowering that deductible, so perhaps some of these high-cost claims would hit that, but it would have resulted in a significant increase. So we felt it best as staff to be able to get a flat renewal and keep our deductible, if you will, where it currently sits was the right decision.
We're always keeping an eye on that, though.
Yes, ma'am.
But if you're looking at that graph as it relates to lives insured, $2,500 a life insured, $190 a life insured is the difference from FY18 to end of March.
Yes, certainly not a trend that we like to see, for sure. And as Ms. Ball alluded to, I think another product of this is post-COVID, all those preventive things that folks put off during that 2.5 year window, folks are getting those things done now, so as they should in terms of preventive care. And when we talk with consultants and our peers that have similar plans to ours, we feel like we're doing all the right things. We have a city health clinic that allows us essentially to buy wholesale versus retail. That's one thing that folks will recommend. We have a robust wellness program, which is what folks recommend you do. So we feel like we're doing all the right things, but we sure could use some luck as we go forward to avoid some of these high-cost claims.
What's the utilization rate of the clinic?
We run anywhere between 83 and up to 90%
You
during
know
flu season.
how that compares to other?
20 to 25% higher than our peers.
Okay.
And I will have to say that we have some folks coming to us to look at how our clinic is operated. There are some national firms that are operating clinics throughout the state of Tennessee and the Southeast as a whole. And the municipalities that are contacting us are not getting the level of care that we are through our local provider ballot that we partner with in our clinic. So they're coming to see how we do things, which is a good thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So in new positions, I'm going to just highlight a few of these positions. I mentioned earlier that in police, we're recommending adding 10 additional sworn officers. This is to get us to the number we need based on the population that we have. We're adding the homeless outreach coordinator, and I think that would be the ones that I would highlight within there. In schools, again, last year there was a tax increase that you approved for building a new Town Acres school. That project is moving forward. We have somebody on board to do the design, and we expect to start construction within late spring, early summer of 2025. So that project is on schedule. We always like to correlate. I'm going to go through these quickly. I know this is a long presentation, but one of the things that we try to do is to correlate back to the commission's strategic plan. So I will be repeating these. I'm going to go quickly through them, though. But under economic vitality, we continue to work on West Walnut Street, and that project should be complete toward the end of this year. Am I correct in saying that? Toward the end of, I think, November, December of 2024.
Substantially.
There's a Christmas parade going down the road, done or not.
You heard that, Wallace. Substantially wants to qualify that. The John Sevier Center redevelopment project is moving along. We also would highlight quality of place as one of your strategic goals. We are beginning the first phase of the Kefauver Farm. The new school would be included in that bucket, and adding that additional homeless outreach quarter with the intent of housing additional folks in our community. When we talk about future-ready infrastructure, we are highlighting the Great Gray Station, Bobby Hicks road improvements, the downtown crosswalk lighting, and then, of course, excellence in city government, renovation of the commission chambers, investment in employees, and maintaining a strong financial position, and then prudent use of unassigned fund balance. And again, that just means that the unassigned fund balance is being used for one-time cost. So the revenues, I'm going to turn this over to our budget director. I'm sure you'll have questions about it, and he'll be better able to answer those. And so Destin will come up and present this piece.
Commissioners, good evening. It's good to be before you again. The revenue for FY '25 is projected at $117.3 million, as is the usual. Property tax and local option sales tax make up the majority of that. This chart, I wanted to talk about sales tax just briefly. It was mentioned earlier about a slowdown in revenue, and we have certainly seen that in FY '21, '22, and '23. We did see significant growth in sales tax. '21 and '22 were double-digit growth years. If this graph went back a few more years, you would see the growth rate be, on average, about 3.2%, so much slower. So while revenue, sales tax revenue, is slowing down from what we have seen the past few years, it's really getting back to a bit more of a normal growth rate. are projecting a 2.5% increase over FY '24, FY '25. The general fund operating budget is proposed at $92.4 million. And you can see the pie, the breakdown there of police, fire, public works, and then the general government makes up the bulk of those expenses. The transfers out are proposed at $29.3 million. Schools, our maintenance of effort to schools is the majority of that, followed closely by our debt service requirements. This chart shows the changes in fund balance over the past several years. And the orange bar, or red, orange bar, shows our growth in fund balance over the past several years. So this budget does propose drawing down on unassigned fund balance for one-time capital equipment or projects. But we wanted to give you a look at what fund balance overall has done the past few years, and that we are in a good position. So your total budget, all funds, general fund, all the school funds, enterprise funds, special revenue funds, all the funds, is pushing $323 million for FY '25. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I would remind you that we do have to have public hearing, as this is the budget ordinance on first reading.
Maybe just a couple of sentence comment about our other funds, like our enterprise funds, our water, sewer, and all that, so for the public to understand. The general fund is what we pay our basic operating costs out of. But maybe you could just help the public understand what these other funds are all about.
Sure. So when we talk about other funds like enterprise funds, we're talking about water, sewer. We're talking about both solid waste funds, municipal and regional, stormwater fund. All those are included in your budget. All those are funded through rates. There are not taxes involved in those funds. Those are the rates that citizens pay, their water bill, their trash bill, their stormwater bill. At this time, as we stand here today, there are no rate increases proposed for any of those funds. We did, in a workshop with you, mention that those rates will be looked at and studied in FY '25, but this budget does not currently include any rate increases for any of the enterprise funds, utility funds.
But those are typically done as a part of a rate study.
Yes.
And they're usually mapped out multiple years in advance, and for the benefit of others, take into account that we're gonna have to buy $1 million worth of equipment and so forth. So it's $1 here, $1 there, because we're looking at it at a 5 or 10 year window rather than waiting until the wheels have fallen off the truck and then scrambling around at the last minute.
Yes, sir.
This first question is related to the homeless outreach. Is there a component of tracking and monitoring to see the level of success, or if there needs to be adjustments as to what they'll do?
Yes, sir. So to make sure that I heard you, the way that we're tracking how successful we are. And just as a reminder, when we hired the homeless outreach coordinator, the goal was to get people housed. So we have been able to bring someone on board who started in November, and since November has helped house with other agencies 26 people. And I think there may be 2 additional ones that are in the works. When we looked at those numbers and saw the success level, all told last year there was only 12 that were housed. And so, we have looked at that and said, we have had such huge success in being able to do that. By adding an additional person, not only does it give us the opportunity to house more people, we know that people are homeless, who are homeless 24/7. So having one person on call and responsible for trying to not only help keep people housed, get them housed, but keep them housed after they're housed, We really need more dedicated staff to be able to do that. But we continue to track those numbers. The numbers that we're seeing now far outweigh anything that we have seen or heard of around the country in terms of success that has happened. We recognize that there are, we call it a pipeline, and that our pipeline is it's quickly, becoming the lack of housing. And so that will be a part of evaluating the additional housing, working with local homeowners to have more HUD Section 8 housing. So we will be tracking and providing the commission with those numbers.
Thank you. You mentioned on the ARPA funding that there's time limits. You know, the one that stuck out in my mind was obviously the larger component.
All of those funds.
On the police staffing, I want to make sure I heard correctly. We entered I guess it was the current fiscal year with 154 sworn officer positions, and then mid-year in the fiscal year that ends at the end of this month, added 11. And then we're talking about adding another 10 in the budget year that starts July 1 and keeping the 11 we added.
Yes, sir.
And so that 154 force capacity, that's the number. I want to make sure I heard what you said correctly. Basically, that's been the number of sworn officers we've budgeted plus or minus 1 or 2.
Since 2000.
Since the year 2000. So Johnson City's population and size and dynamics from the year 2000 to today, unchanged in the way we staff police. Now, what's the other part of that is, at what point over the last 10 years have we been fully staffed to the original 154 budget?
Since I have been here, we have not been at that level. We are now over. We are now over the 154, and I think we are.
I was going there.
Within 6 of being fully staffed, and have just interviewed 4 that look like really good candidates. So we will believe in July we will be at the 165 number, and then be able in the 11 months following to be at the 175.
But in my time on the commission, I don't believe we've ever been anywhere. I mean, I think we've always been short, probably an average of 10. So if 154 was the number, 145 was probably really the
I
number.
remember one time we were 20 officers short, so.
We were, I was looking at some notes recently, and at the beginning of 2022, we were 30%, we were 30 officers down.
And the thing that's driven us to this adjusted number is really an index that says that you need about 2.5 officers for every 1,000 of your population. And we have grown, we're probably closer to 75,000 right now than any number. And so we just didn't keep up using that as the thing that, should be moving us toward.
And I just wanted to point that number out because that's a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about 20-plus positions in a population that a year ago was 150 positions. That is a major change. And if you want to talk about corporate culture, and that's significant because corporate culture is what happens when you aren't looking. And when you have 1,000 employees in 21 departments, it really matters what happens when you're not looking because you can't be looking everywhere all the time. Sufficiently staffing all of those departments is what determines, because if you hire people and then fail to equip them to succeed, you're going to get exactly what you equip them to provide. And so I think this is a testament to the staff that this has been prioritized.
Yes, Commissioner Wise, and I would also point out, the reason that we put up the amount, which rounded up very easily to 300,000 in training, is because we are bringing on a lot of new people. And so we recognize in bringing on a lot of new police officers, we need to have a lot of training so that we can help them be successful.
Mr. Thompson, question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
I know this because we've dealt with the budget for a number of years. Again, for the public, what's in our general fund regarding our debt is really the budget for paying the debt service, paying our mortgage, so to speak. And we kind of keep that number somewhere around $10 to $11 million
Yes. So, for FY '25, the general fund transfer for debt service is approximately $10.7 million, plus in round numbers, another 100,000 from economic development reserve. There's also a component from schools that is a little over 500,000 as well.
Yeah, the debt the city carries, I mean, when we build roads and, you know, everything that we do, the comptroller allows us to go up to, what, 10% of our net assets, and we're somewhere around 5%, is that correct?
I would have to defer to Ms. Laus on where we are on the percentage. We have an internal policy on 10% of our operating expenses, but we also have, as outlined in our charter, based on our net assets, and that number is in the audit, but I don't know that right off the top of my head. I
I think it's
apologize.
somewhere 5 or 6%, Joe.
Yeah, and I think that's a self-imposed policy, but it also has big implications at bond rating time. And so the reason it's a self-imposed policy is the bond rating is where
In our
you'll
bond
feel
rating,
it.
should we go ahead and state that?
If
Our bond
it's
rating
A,
right now?
double A.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's double A, yeah.
Little A's or big A's?
I'm sorry.
Little A's or big A's or a combo?
Capitalized, it's capitalized
Big
A's.
A's. That's important.
One of the questions I imagine we may get as we are out and about is, I think we mentioned, there was mentioned 6 million in recurring employee costs. Where's that coming from? Are we cutting somewhere else, or is it due to the increase in the revenues that you showed?
Right, so our, and that 6 million's in the general fund, because that was just talking about the general fund. But our operating revenues cover our operating expenses. So we are not allowed to use any sort of fund balance to cover operating expenses. And we have sufficient revenue to cover our operating expenses. Any drawdown on fund balance that's been in this budget or any prior budget has only been for one-time capital expenses.
That's all I've got. Yeah. What is our fund balance right now?
Our fund balance as of the audit in FY '23 was north of $50 million. Now, not all that is available.
Right.
There's a component that's unassigned,
Right.
and that's what we would draw on to pay. And that was approximately $24.5 million at the audited number for FY '23.
So I'm just saying, we're in good shape financially.
We are
That's
in
what
good
I want.
shape financially, yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for, this is a first reading and a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak can come forward, state your name and your address. You have 3 minutes to talk. I will open the public hearing. Seeing no one coming from, we'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Laus.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commission, your next order of business is item 7.4. This is an ordinance providing for the conveyance of certain parcel of real property located on Lakeview Drive in the town of Unicoi, Tennessee, owned by the city of Johnson City, to Roger and Sharon Gardner. And our Assistant City Manager, Willis, will present this item.
As you're aware, Commission, about 5 weeks ago, we listed property in Buffalo Valley. There are 2 parcels within what we listed. One of those is approximately 91 acres. What I'm bringing before you here tonight is a small parcel of about .53 in general half acre that adjoins Roger and Sharon Gardner's property. They made an offer on the property. We counter-offered and came to an agreement. So we would like to convey and sell that property to those individuals.
And this is already platted separate from the larger
Yes,
property?
yes, sir.
and
It's
move-
platted separately, and we had to list it separately.
Move approval.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Laus.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
The next item for consideration is our ordinances that are under second reading, and these are under second reading in addition to public hearing, Mayor. This is item number 8.1, ordinance 4864-23. This is an ordinance to authorize a quitclaim deed to 724 LLC for permanent drainage easements as part of the West Walnut Street project. We have our director, Jason Miles, here to present on this item.
I think that's Andy Best.
Well, welcome back.
So we presented the first reading previously. Are there any additional questions or?
You could just do a highlight of it for me. I was not here at the last meeting.
Right,
so-
yes, ma'am. Wallace McCulloch, city engineer, will give you the details here.
So it was the O.G. Kelly property that is next to the harmonized property that we're going to turn into a storm pond. We're going to exchange a 12-foot strip along the eastern edge of the storm pond property in exchange for property on the O.G. Kelly property next to State of Franklin for an expansion of the storm pond. What we had hoped to achieve in the future is to continue further east along State of Franklin to allow for more stormwater retention along that area. It's basically what it's about.
Move approval. I have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's public hearing.
I gotta do that first.
Getting carried away over here.
It's all right. So again, this, I will open the public hearing. If you want to discuss what we're voting on, come forward, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Open the public hearing. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
Now I'd make a motion.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Laus?
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Mayor Fowler?
Yes.
Commission, the next the next item on the agenda is ordinance 4881-24. This is the second reading and public hearing. It's an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee by changing from I-1 Light Industrial District to R2 Low Density Residential District, R5 High Density Residential District to R4 Medium Residential District for the property located at 0 Princeton Road. We have our planner, Mr. McNamer, here.
Good evening, Commissioners. I believe we're all quite familiar with this one at this point. I'll be happy to answer any questions on the slides that were previously presented at first reading and our previous second reading that was deferred. If there are any questions, I can answer those, but I'm just going to skip straight to our staff recommendation here, which has stayed the same. Staff is recommending approval of this rezoning to R4 based that we're solving the split zone of this lot, going from 3 zones to 1 zone on this lot. We're keeping the residential character of Nave Drive at the corner of Princeton. We're maximizing the use and putting the development on the side of the property that's not going to be disturbing the existing stream. We're creating a buffer and a transitional zone from the collector road of Princeton and the development on the other side to the adjoining R2 that is on the east side of this property, as well as we're falling in line of the past planning commission decisions that have repeatedly favored for higher density residential on this lot and in this area. Also like to bring up that along with our recommendation that we're following the bridge plan that explicitly states that this type of infill development, which is what this is, states is the most desirable and efficient means of accommodating the future growth. Now, before we get into any other new things, I'd like to kind of go where we left off in the last meeting on the discussion of the entrance location. City Engineer Wallace McCulloch is here to explain the Public Works decision and recommendation on this, and then Anthony Todd with Traffic is here to go over the traffic data and the traffic study.
So I was really just going to address the ARAP, which would be required for this thing because they would have to cross that stream there. And as part of the TDEC permit, they have to address an alternatives analysis, which means you look at what other alternatives there are for an entrance. And so the green entrance, which shows where we want to place it, is the only real alternative that they would accept because you're crossing the stream when you don't have to. And so they're looking for what they call a de minimis impact or degradation, and so, which is just basically no impact. And so any crossing of that stream is an impact. It's in a wooded area, and those are considered a little higher value in terms of streams. A wooded wetland stream has a little higher value. And so we just don't feel like that TDEC would even approve it when from a traffic standpoint, as Anthony will talk, Nave is the most practical access point. And so if we were to try to do the other one, or if the developer was to try to do the other one, we don't think it would be approved. So I'll be glad to answer any questions along those lines.
From a traffic standpoint, let's assume there weren't a wetland there, and this was just perfect, and it was all things being equal. Would it be beneficial to have, or would it be advisable to have another curb cut on Princeton?
No.
And why not?
I'll let Anthony address that. He's the real
Okay.
expert here.
Oh, you have a slide.
I do have a few slides. Traffic study was done by Marin and Craig at this intersection. And so what they did was they did some traffic counts in the morning and the afternoon. So there was an AM and PM peak period that was analyzed to see what was the existing traffic, and this is your existing traffic. The numbers outside the parentheses are the PM volumes. The numbers inside the parentheses are the AM peak periods. So these are just during the peak hours, both AM and PM. Sure.
Let's take this kind of slowly.
Sure.
Let's go back to that slide if you don't mind. First of all, did we engage Matter and Craig to do this study?
We did not.
Versus
So
the
the developer is responsible for that. So we requested that study, and the developer engaged them to do the study.
Okay, so upper right, 462 cars during the period of time that this snapshot.
That's in the evening, right?
Correct.
This was the, so 462 cars are going toward.
Rum Street.
Rum Street.
Yeah.
In the morning, 248.
Those are the PM volumes. The 462 are the PM volumes. The AM volumes are 248 in that
248.
direction.
Okay. 17 are actually, as they're traveling south, are turning up Nate Drive, which we would consider cut-throughs, right?
Not necessarily.
Or they work all night, they're going home.
They could be. So the PM volumes are the 17, so they could be coming home from work. The 4 could be working a later shift, or they could be cutting through.
Or it could be the cable guy.
It could be.
Or it could be one of us driving over there to look. I promise I'll drive through your neighborhood less when this is all done. So that's at least a half a dozen trips.
In the morning going out, you have 10 turning left during that time.
Correct.
What's the hours of the morning?
It was the peak hour between 7 and 9 a.m., so they counted between 7 and 9 a.m., and they picked the peak hour
So you only had 10 people during that time, turning left?
that they counted, the day that they counted.
And then 12 were turning back toward Bristol,
Correct.
that way.
Here is the, and the trip generation, they generated the trips based on 34 units, not 24. So there was 10 additional units because that was what the original proposal was. And they chose not to reduce that to show a higher number rather than a lower number. And so we agreed that that was probably the conservative way to handle it. And so these are the numbers that would be generated And I know it's a lot of numbers, and sometimes it can get a little confusing in these charts. But if you look at your AM peak hour, your PM peak hour, those are the ones that we're most concerned about. The 24-hour numbers are there, but those are scattered through the day so much that they're not as noticeable as during the AM and PM peak periods. So those are the ones that we pay the most attention to. If we can solve the problems at those times, we can solve it through the day. So you see a total of 12 would be generated during the AM peak, and you see how the exit is higher in the morning, as you would expect, and then the PM, the exit would be lower in the AM, or the PM, the entry would be greater.
So on
that
the
they're what you would
previous,
expect.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
They looked at 2 hours. They counted across 2 hours, but then they focused on the more intensive of the 2 hours.
That is
And so
correct.
the number, do you mind to back up the
It's not
slide?
a 2-hour count. It's-
Well, but so when we're looking at, let's say the 10 a.m., or I mean, not 10, the 10 left turns off Nave in the AM, that's a 1-hour window.
That is correct.
Okay.
And so what
Because I
they-
think one of the neighbors actually told us that on his Ring doorbell, he counted 190 cars in 10 hours,
Okay.
which would be 19 cars an hour.
Right. That's
So these
conceivable.
numbers at least are consistent with what they observed on their Ring doorbell.
And so, again, these numbers are overestimated as far as what would be expected to be generated by this type of development. Another conservative approach would be to push all of the traffic in this study toward the Princeton-Nave intersection. So that's exactly what they did. If we're trying to find out if we're having a problem at the Princeton and Nave intersection, you push all that traffic to Princeton and Nave, you're going to find out if you've got a problem. And so that's what this study did. It showed all of it going to Princeton and Nave. The caveat in there is that the note is that we know that not all of it's going to Princeton and Nave. Some of it will go back through the neighborhood, but this is a higher estimate than what you would expect. So 75% would be coming in the, coming from the Roan Street direction, 25% coming from Oakland Avenue, and then 75% again going out toward Roan Street and 25 in as a part of the analysis.
This doesn't include the new dwellings.
This is only the new dwellings.
This is only the new dwellings.
Yes,
Okay.
this is how to distribute those
We don't know
numbers.
what's there now, so I was confused because I thought this was
Sure.
counting what's happening right now.
It is not.
Okay.
Now, the previous existing, that was only what's there now. That first slide that we looked at, that is only the existing traffic. We're going to look at the future traffic added on to this
So
intersection.
we'll have a slide that puts it all together.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So this is the amount of traffic that would be generated as far as the exiting traffic and also the entering traffic. The numbers are not extremely high, and they're spread over the hour, so they may all show up about the same time. Sometimes we see that, but most of the time it's going to be spread out a little bit so that you don't see all of them at the same time. In the PM, as you might expect, most of them are going to be coming in. You're going to have some people going out as well, as people are going to be going out to do things in the afternoon.
Is that still pushing everything to Princeton?
It is.
So it doesn't count if they're coming through from Mount Council?
That is correct. So this actually is looking at your future and your existing traffic. It's all put into this table and analyzed. So your 2024 existing, and then your build out, and you got both your AM and your PM peak periods. So the part here that you want to pay attention to is the level of service. So level of service A is basically a free flow without much interruption. So that's what a level of service A represents. A level of service B is a step down from that. You're going to have more interruptions, but it's still a good operating intersection. If you were to go down to a level of service C, and you do not see that here, it's still considered to be acceptable in an urban area. And then also D is considered to be acceptable, although I would call it tolerable when you get down to level of service D. When you get down to E and F, those are where you're starting to see failures. So we're nowhere close to any of those. So we're at level of service A and B. Any questions on that?
Not quite sure.
Okay. So your northbound and southbound are Princeton roads. You would expect them to be level service A because they're not being interrupted. So what you would expect to be a slightly lower level service would be that of Nave. And so it's down at a level service B.
And so what differentiates an A from a B? I mean, what is it that's moving it?
It's
I mean,
a-
it's already at a B existing, if I'm reading that correctly, so it's not changing.
That's correct.
And so it's being assigned to B.
It's based on the amount of delay. So each vehicle is assigned amount of delay. And so your average delay
Okay,
over
so somebody's
that.
driving down Nave and they end up at the stop sign at Princeton, and then they're having to wait because cars are coming. That's what's moving it from an A to a B.
That's correct.
I see.
So you're saying on southbound, they only wait 7.9 seconds before they pull out.
And that's primarily because of the left turns.
And then on westbound, 10.6 seconds.
Correct.
Then the next category is build-outs, then add the new structures.
Correct.
That's significantly changed.
Any other questions?
Yeah, do you have more slides?
I do.
Okay, well then I want to see where the slides are going before I ask my question again.
Another one is the queue length. So we've been concerned about how much the traffic is going to back up there. So the 95 percentile expected queue length is going to be basically putting you no more than 2 cars. Can you see more than 2 cars? Absolutely. Are you going to normally see far less than 2 cars? Most of the time you're going to see 1 car.
Can you start that over again? If you see more than 2 cars, but I don't, those are all double-digit numbers. What do you?
Those are feet. So a car is basically 20 to 25 feet. So 50 feet would be basically 2 cars.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry
So,
about that.
Explain to me, Princeton Road, southbound, 16 in the morning, that's feet?
It is, but it's an average over the hour, so it's a little bit of a weird number, but it's an average over the hour. Yeah, I would call that 1 to 2 cars. 16 would be 1 to 2 cars. When you get to 37, 44, you're basically looking at 2 cars.
Okay. That would have been an easier number to understand.
How many
Just
cars,
2
not
cars.
feet.
Okay, thank you.
Now, as we get into access points, this has been a topic of discussion. This comes from the TDOT access manual that they published recently. And they've taken some of this from other publications. The TRB Access Management Manual 2014 is where they got this table, or this chart. And so the gray area in the middle, the light gray in the middle is just the intersection. So the darker gray is the areas you don't want to be putting driveways or roads. So those are the areas you need to keep back from the intersection to protect the intersection from problems that you have by being close to the intersection. So putting some numbers to that, they have lots of charts that go along with this. Rather than trying to understand everything that's on that chart, I want you to focus on the major collector and the minor collector. And those are the areas also we want to look at the urban area or suburban area. You can look at those 4 numbers right there, the only ones you really need to pay attention to on this chart because they're the only ones that pertain to this situation. So 660 feet, and these is the spacing of intersections. So if you were to have 2 intersections within 660 feet on a major or minor collector, that's not recommended. And the problems that are caused by that, and I'll get into what problems they cause here shortly. Now, if you look at driveways, there's a similar type of chart for that, so major and minor collector again. And in this case, look at the urban, suburban, and look at the full access, because we do not have a median there, and we do not have any restrictions like a right-of-way fence. So it only applies to the full access, so you look at the 660 feet and the 440 feet. So it would be one of those numbers, whichever one you think it best fits. We're kind of in between the two, minor collector and a major collector functionally. Princeton Road acts somewhere like a major collector at times as far as functionally, but the volumes are more like a minor collector. So it's somewhere in between in the description. So the 330, the 660 and 440 feet are primarily what we're looking at this. Now, as you look at the minimum spacing of driveways on the opposite side of the street, I know this is getting a little complicated, and I apologize for that, because now we're looking at, if you had a driveway on the other side of the street, there's a different spacing requirement than there is on the same side of the street. When you're talking about nave, we're talking about the same side of the street because that's where the development is. Now we're looking at the opposite side of the street. There's also some requirements as it relates to that. And again, we're in the suburban and urban area. So 330 to 175 feet. So here's the distance that we've got between nave and the first driveway on the other side of the street is 270 feet. So if you take into consideration the fact that we were supposed to have already been 330 to 440 feet, away on the same side of the street, there is nowhere to put it. It's not possible to fit it in there and meet these guidelines. And you look at across the street, there's no way that we can possibly get a driveway in there and meet any of these regulations or any of these requirements. Now, we can't always meet requirements because of property lines. In this case, we can, because we can have the driveway on nave. And that's where it should be based on all of this. And here's another reason why. As you increase the number of unsignalized access points, this is both an intersection and a driveway, the more you have per mile, the higher your crash rate goes up. So at 10 points per mile, you have a crash rate of basically 1. By the time you get to 70, it's 3.6. And those are the numbers that are increasing, and that's why we try to reduce the number of access points, because the more access points and the closer you put them to each other, the more problems you have and the more collisions you have.
So if I lived on Nave and 24 units were built there, but forget the creek, it accessed out onto Princeton, how would I experience that curb cut?
If you were to access on Princeton?
So I live further up Nave.
Okay.
These don't cut out onto Nave, they cut out onto Princeton.
Okay.
What is my experience at Princeton and Nave? Is it better or worse?
It's worse because...
And why is it worse?
Because you have another driveway that you're having to deal with people coming and going, and every time you have another access point, you have more that you have to deal with, both visually and physically, because you've got people turning in and out. It makes it harder for you to get in and out because you've got a driveway nearby. And it also, what I say is it creates more visual noise for you, so you've got more to look at, and it makes it harder for you to make a good decision.
Can you go back to that slide?
The imagery, the red and the green entrance. So that's what my concern was is.
These two driveways right here are too close together, and they're a problem. And so we don't want to continue to have those types of problems.
Can you put it back to the one that had the proposed entrance on the nave and on the Princeton? Had the red.
It's way back.
Oh, it's on a different
It's
presentation.
on Wallace.
Sorry.
Sheet.
This one?
Yes. And so that was when I saw this. That's what concerned me is, you know, you're opening out onto a 4-lane, and that visual, you know, what was the term used? Noise.
Yes.
is what, you know, it reminds me of Roan Street in that you've got people going fairly fast, if not too fast, on that road in both directions. You add another close curb cut, and you're trying to look left, you're trying to look right, and you're trying to look across, because not only do you have the curb cut on Nave, but you've got two coming out across the street. I imagine, you know, what you see at Run Street between Cootie Brown's and Little Caesars. There's accidents all the time because people are both trying to get out onto a, you know, fast-moving street and accelerate, and then they end up hitting because they miss some car that is speeding
Yeah,
down the
there's too
four-lane.
much for people to process, and you put more out there than a person can process, they're going to make a mistake.
So the distance between Nave and the red line right there, which is where theoretically the driver would go out, is less than 270?
It is.
Okay.
Sorry to take it off your slides.
Here are some other locations where we have in town where people are accessing onto streets that go into neighborhoods, or some such thing as that, where you have a multifamily joining into a street that connects to single family. And reducing those access points is certainly what we try to achieve to the extent that we can. And that's what TDOT's mission has been for the last few years, trying to work toward an access manual to try to do that very thing, to try to reduce the access points, because reducing access points will usually reduce the accidents significantly.
So that's Town Acres,
This is Town Acres, and so this is,
Avalon.
yes. So this is
Villas
Browns
at
Mill
Browns Mill.
Villas, I believe, the Villas at Browns Mill. And so this accesses onto Avonlea, however you pronounce it, and then that goes back over to People Street in Browns Mill.
I think I remember that project very well, and the people of Town Acres were very concerned about those folks coming through Town Acres, when in fact, the Town Acres people are going out through.
They actually complained about Town Acres cutting through their
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is Tunbridge, so there's these units right here around Patey Drive and Cherokee. They access here because that's the preferred access point, rather than trying to add another driveway all the way down through here and trying to, I think there's 16 units if I remember correctly, trying to access at different points. And so the more access points, the more problems you're going to have.
I will comment on this. I live in the neighborhood across, and so I come out through that intersection 3 or 4 times a day probably. And there's no issue with cars having to sit or, you know, get lined up to try to get out, at all. And I don't know how many houses are in Tunbridge, but I think there may be more than 16 apartments there, but it's close, but then there's some others right on up from it.
There are.
But it works pretty smoothly.
And then this is the Franklin Square, accesses Sundale Road rather than trying to access. They actually have, the property actually goes all the way to Sunset. It doesn't show in this slide, but it cuts across right here. So there could have been an access point there. We certainly did not want that there. It's close to a signal for one thing, but it's another access point that was not needed. And it also accesses Sundale. This large residential development here accesses Sundale and goes back through the mall as well. This one may be hard to see, but we did an after study to see how the traffic had changed after we put in speed humps in the neighborhood. It didn't seem to reduce the traffic very much. It was kind of inconclusive, if you ask me. But the speeds definitely went down. So we had speeds of 35 or greater for the 85th percentile before. Now, the highest speed that we've got for 85th percentile that we're seeing around 28, 29. So that's an improvement. That's a significant improvement. So the 85th percentile is not the average, it's not all the cars, it's what 85% of the cars are going at or below, and that's the standard that we use. Do you have any questions? That's all I've got.
Just, we use Matter and Craig for a lot of our engineering and studies and things like that as well, don't we? And they're a very, very reputable company.
Yes.
Even though they were doing work for the developer.
Correct.
We use them quite often.
You want to talk about it? I can talk. I just brought this up, me and Wallace thought about this week.
And so I just went on Google Maps just and picked a residence within the Nave, off of Nave, just to see how long it took to get from there to Target and how they would route you. And in the case up there, to go to Target, they're gonna take you down Princeton. It takes 3 minutes, I think, I can't read it very well, and then 4 minutes to go the other way. So I guess I just wanted to point that out, that in all cases, and Bryce looked at some other alternatives too, that when they're routing people through the neighborhood, they don't go through the neighborhood, I'm sorry, they don't, that's an alternative, but it takes longer. So most people are gonna go to Princeton to get out and go somewhere else. So they're gonna avoid going through the neighborhood. I just wanted to point that out.
Right, and obviously Princeton Road, Nave Drive, they're all public roads. Anybody can use those. Everybody, it's a public road. But for this development and where the location is here, there's no distance shortcut incentive. There's no time-saving incentive. Realistically, you could turn on to a 4-lane, 30-mile-an-hour road, or you can go 15 to 25 miles an hour over 6 speed bumps and then turn out and get to the same exact location. So as we can see here, they both lead to Target. Something we haven't really brought up is that interstate access is right here. You don't have another interstate access unless you want to go all the way down to Unaka. Also, Princeton also accesses up to what we see as Silverdale here, and then up to Oakland, which you can get to anywhere on the eastern part of the city from there.
Can I ask a land use?
Yes.
Kind of moving it more back in that way. One of the things that I think Mr. Hunt said was that, you know, there's little is known about the project, I think was what he said. And I want to make sure I understand the nature of the site plan. And then maybe we could speak about, so from a planning standpoint, we're asking about land use. Is it single family? Is it multifamily? Is it commercial? Is it medical? We're not deciding whether it's brick or vinyl. We're not deciding whether, you know, Cadillac builder or, you know, less than Cadillac builder. We don't have a say in who the builder is.
That's correct, yeah. The only time we would look into design guidelines or something would be a historic district or an overlay district.
Okay.
Now,
So
with this, we're approving the rezoning for use of the land.
But they're bound, correct?
Yeah, they would be bound.
So what we do know about the project is essentially the approximate footprint, the location of the curb cut, the required buffer, and the number of units.
Correct. And the use.
And then that it's residential.
Yes.
Okay.
And when mentioning the buffers and whatnot, the plan that they've presented, which is over and above what's required, that would be held to, or would they be able to pull back from the number of shrubberies and the number of parking spaces that they've presented?
As staff has a bit of discretion with that to kind of deal with what's not explicitly stated as a major minor change with this, and having a lot of comments about the parking, I would say if they removed any parking, that we would consider that a concept plan amendment.
So, you know, one of the questions is always, if we approve it, and then the petitioner whose intent may be pure and vision may be grand fizzles, and the deal doesn't manifest itself, what's the worst thing that could happen? Then the other scenario that sometimes will get asked is if we don't approve it and we just let it go with the 3 zones it has now, what could happen?
Right.
Paint a picture of both scenarios.
So with your first scenario, are you asking, what if the developer walks away after it is approved?
Yeah, he just decides he wants to do something else, and it never develops, and it sits there for another 5 years, and somebody comes along and grabs it, and now they're entitled to, what are they entitled to? What could they do without having to go through this?
Right, so they would, the concept plan is bound to the land and the property, not to the developer. So they can walk away, another person can come in, they would still be bound to the curb cut, the number of units, the use, really exactly what the concept plan is. And that will be bound unless someone, whether it be this developer, another developer, or a different buyer, whoever, they would have to come before the planning commission and then before you guys for 3 readings for a concept plan amendment if they wanted to do anything different. Now, did that answer your question?
That was part of it, and then the other one is if we deny this, and the person who owns the land, who has every right to develop the land, proceeds down that path of development and only has to pull permits and abide by those rules, kind of what's the scenario in that kind of scene?
So after a theoretical denial of this?
Yeah, or theoretically, they never came and asked, and they just,
Right,
and they came
right.
in and they pulled permits, and they're just doing what they're allowed to do with really very little regard to community input.
Right, absolutely, and I understand your question a bit better now. We have a very large section of the light industrial district here. Here's just some of the permitted uses. I have the full list, some of the permitted use. I mean, you can have a warehouse, truck terminal, car lot, laundromat, really any of these things that are completely incompatible with this area and the residential character of the street.
And so in that picture, we're talking about the purple section.
Yep, so here's the purple section, and to think about this, even without a rezoning request, the creek and the complications of the entrance on Princeton are still apparent. So you would still very likely have that entrance come off of Nave Drive to access an industrial development. But any of these things, we cannot deny them because that is what is permitted by right on this.
In the purple section.
In the purple section.
And the purple section is how many acres of the total?
I think you've got an image that kind of shows like what could go there. Is that still in this presentation?
Yeah, I'm going to have Todd Wood mention that a bit more. I'm just going to go through some of,
Before you, we get off this topic, but if the owner of the property right now, who owns all 3 parcels, decides they're gonna sell each parcel separately, whoever bought the purple piece, because they don't own the other land, how would they access that property?
then that would eliminate, if
Are they
the
platted
buyer
separate?
they're not planning to subdivide,
They're not.
and we can't
Are they
force
platted
them.
separately, though?
What's that?
Are these 3 zones are not platted separately, are they?
No, this is one lot
Okay.
with 3 uses on
So they'd
it.
have to go through the replat process before they sold
So-
them separately.
If the owner of the property did desire to subdivide, I suppose they could do that because they'd still have frontage here and here.
Well, they
That's
prob-
not the proposal that we're faced with, so we're looking at this lot as a whole.
Well,
The
even
town-
if they sold the part that's industrial, they would more than likely provide a access easement onto Nave.
I would have to see what a proposal would look like to analyze that further.
Yes, the subdivision regulations do permit lots without frontage to have access easements. And of course, that would still have public frontage, but you could still arrange for an access easement on that. And I think the other piece here, if we're talking about worst-case scenarios, he'll get to a slide in a moment that actually shows this property, how it could be developed as it's configured right now. The other worst-case scenario, I think, if you consider it worst case, is if this entire property were rezoned to I-1. I think the question was asked a moment ago, how much of that property is zoned industrial? Mr. Wood probably has that exact figure. It's roughly half of it, so it's 2.7 acres lot, so probably about 1.3, 1.25, 1.4, somewhere in that neighborhood. If that were rezoned to industrial, and I think a future applicant would have a very good argument to have it rezoned industrial because half of the lot is, then you could have a fairly sizable industrial development that would allow any of these sorts of things. That's one case. But yes, access easements are possible off of Nave Drive.
The property that's on the corner there of Nave and Princeton on the opposite corner, that's zoned MS1. So that could be a variety, I mean, if the current owner decided to sell it, there are a number of medical,
Troublesome.
Commercial.
clinics, drug rehabilitation, methadone clinics, that kind of stuff that can be put on that particular parcel right there.
That's correct.
Okay, that takes up for the majority of the lot. Now, with the R5, which was the initial request that we downgraded to R4 to keep the density in check, that's essentially what we are. There's no real difference other than the density from R5 to R4. I believe maybe the schools and swimming clubs are added on at that point. And then even with the R2, there's no guarantee that that means a single-family house. There's still other uses that they could do. Maybe on top of our worst-case scenario is we have industrial use with an easement, a cemetery, and then some type of pool. I mean, you could really get in a hodgepodge of that stuff.
Well, and I think we should focus on what are realistically viable.
Yes.
What could be realistically viable is a daycare center. And you want to talk about car trips at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mhm.
I pass one on my way to and from work and schedule my drive 20 minutes to account for that. So, I mean, that's probably more likely than a cemetery.
Yep. Just throwing it out there. We had the
Sure.
discussion of worst-case scenarios, so.
I think one other thing here, the portion that's zoned R2, when you figure up the square footage, it's right around 29,000, 30,000 square feet or so. R2 lot would have to be 15,000 square feet. You could probably create one lot there, maybe two. If the entire thing were rezoned to R2, possibility of 7 lots. That's not realistic. It would be something less of that. But with frontage on Nave Drive, now you're talking about multiple entrances onto Nave Drive for individual lots with multiple.
People backing out of driveways.
That's correct. With no buffering requirements or anything along those lines.
I'm just checking on time to see if that answered all of your questions and see if we want to move on to Mr. Wood, or move on to public hearing.
Yeah, this is the image that Mr. Wood has provided us with an alternative possibility with the current zoning. If he can speak in more detail with this.
Anything else? All right. I will open the public hearing again. Am I shut off already? I just started. All right. So if you wish to speak, you can come forward, state your name and your address, and you got 3 minutes to speak. So I will open it now.
All right, Todd Wood, 1804 Galen Drive, Johnson City, engineer for the applicant. Not going to go back through all the rezoning and why this is the right thing. You heard from your own experts. It's the right thing. What I'm going to focus on is the question of what could happen. My client, the applicant, asked me to look at this because they're still thinking about buying the property, whether it's rezoned or not. So how do you maximize this property? So you have it's about 1.1 acres in the I-1, 0.7 or 8 in the R5, and 0.7 or 8 in the R2. You could get 17 dwelling units in the R5. I'm showing 16. You have stacked apartments, 8 on one level, 8 above. Then you have the parking that would go with this. And because this is multifamily, you'd have a buffer over here, similar to the current proposal with the rezoning. But there would be no buffer along here. It would just be trees every 50 feet. You have the I-1 back here, which could be contractor's yard, warehouse, mini storage. With the drive, that could be right here, coming in. So that's a lot of asphalt. The applicant is trying to work with the rezoning to do a multifamily development that fits in this area, that is a better fit than that right there. That could very easily occur, whether my applicant buys the property and just does it by right, and also just so everybody understands, I know you all know this, if they do this by right, it will not go to the planning commission. It will not go to the city commission. It will be at staff level only. So if the city commission and the public would prefer to have control over what occurs, then you have to rezone the property. Otherwise, you have no control over it.
Mr. Wood, you, I think a couple of weeks ago, the last time it was looked at, there was an example of a townhouse similar to what is being
Yeah, I
proposed
think
to
it's
build
in here
there.
somewhere. Do you know where it is, Brian?
And
Just
we're
keep
in
going.
public hearing, and so I'm just concerned that the applicant's engineer may be cut short, and
Well, I
we may
would
want to.
recommend that what he has to say is be beneficial to the people
Right.
who would propose to extend his time.
I just wanted to warn you that was
Yeah.
about to happen.
Yeah, thank you. This is what they're thinking. It may not be exactly like this, and of course, they can't be held to do this, but this is kind of what they're thinking about. And they did have it appraised based on current market conditions for three-bedroom, one-car garage at $268,000 per unit. And, and also with this, they are planning to sell these. That layout that I showed you with the apartments, when you have multifamily next to industrial, they're never gonna be sold. They'll have to be rentals at that point. So,
And rentals versus sales is not a land use consideration.
correct.
We don't get to pick who, we get to pick
Exactly.
whether they're multifamily or not how they own their occupancy.
Right. I just want people to understand, because they have been talking about selling them, but yeah, they could be the other way with rentals, and they most likely would be
And
if
they
under
would
current.
there be an HOA? in
With this, there would be. If it was the apartment complex I showed before, that'd probably just be a property manager.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Paula Eldred. I live at 2223 Lakeland Drive. I sent an email before the last meeting, and I sent it again today, and you have a copy in front of you. It very clearly defines what our issues are. They showed us Google Maps saying, oh, it's gonna go to Princeton Road, but that's not the reality of the people that live there. Everybody knows you're gonna do everything you can to avoid Princeton and Roan and Broyles and all that mess up there. I even included a picture of coming up Roan Street and how you get to that point where you're at Mount Castle and you're like, am I gonna go up through there? The day before, that traffic was just boom, 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 boom. I mean, it was like packed all the way up through there. I'm not gonna continue up that road. I'm gonna take a right and go on Mountcastle and cut through the neighborhood of Kipping. That's what those people are gonna do too. We care less about that traffic study at Nave and Princeton. That wasn't the problem. The problem is Kipping and Mountcastle and how many people are gonna come from there through the neighborhood to there, because that's the reality of living there. That's not a map, that's the reality of living there. And the only time I ever go to Princeton is to get on the interstate or, you know, pretty much go to Indian Trail. That's it. If you want to go to ETSU, the mall, everything else, it's that way. It's Kipping every time. And it's just the reality. I want to say that my family, my husband's family, which is my family, we've been in Johnson City since the 1700s. I have fourth generation Hilltopper children. We are proud to live in this city. We feel safe here. We are talking about children. We're not talking about traffic. And yes, we understand what could happen and all these scare tactics, but you know, we agree that it needs rezoned, maybe R3, maybe R2, because definitely at R4, 11 spaces is not enough extra parking. Not, especially if they're 3-bedroom. You can't have 11 extra spaces of parking. Because if they're 3-bedroom, that's definitely a storage space, not a parking space, that garage. 184 children a day are hit by cars. 184. 2 of them die. That doesn't mean the others are just fine and dandy. That means they could have lifelong disabilities from those, but there's 184. I have many titles just as you all do. I'm a nurse manager. I am a daughter. I'm a wife. I take care of people in my family. I'm very active in the church. The most important job I have is a mother, and that's why I've been here every single time. I am a mother trying to protect my children and the other children in that neighborhood. Not a lot could be here today because their vacations have started, but they were here every single time before and have signed that petition. Thank you.
I'm Keith Fields, and I live at 2206 Nave Drive. We've heard a lot of stuff said today, and I want to point out that it's not accurate at all. I live on Nave Drive. When we saw the traffic study, I've got 3 family members that drive through there twice a day, every day, 3 separate cars, my family alone. You're going to double the traffic on that Nave Drive with 24 units. There's only 26 addresses on there, period. There's already signs up right now saying no parking from here to the corner in anticipation of the overflow of people coming into that complex. There's not enough parking. They will be parking on the streets. There's already parking on the streets. Right at the main intersection, when you turn in, with all that congestion, you're going to have trailer cars, where those signs are there or not. I can take pictures. There's already been cars there parked. And I've been to every meeting and I've seen slides. This neighborhood's surrounded by R4. It fits in with the characteristic. Not true. None of those R4 come into our neighborhood. None of the traffic comes in and out of our neighborhood from those residents. I've heard, oh, well, it's in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Most certainly it's not. This neighborhood's not a built-up, high-density residents coming in. That's why my wife and I chose to live there. We heard that the surrounding R4, if you enter and exit the neighborhood, the buffer, well, that buffer right now is undevelopable, so you can just leave it as is. No matter what that is zoned, can't be developed. You heard, oh, there's, like she said, it's a scare tactic. Oh, they could put up an eye, this could be developed here. It's not, there's already storage facilities and light industrial all around that neighborhood, and it's not a problem. In fact, it wouldn't even cause any extra traffic in there. I guarantee that traffic study, I don't know what the so-called experts were listening to us. Go there, see for yourself. That traffic study is not accurate at all. I can guarantee that. I could prove it myself with any limited time. The amount of congestion or even influx of traffic is going to double. I don't understand why we have to sit here and say, oh, there's only one way to resolve the Planning Commission's recommendation to have the split zoning issue resolved. We could rezone all of that R3. Or the I-1 and the R2 could be rezoned R3. They said that 6 houses could be developed with all this extra driveways. That's not true. You could have a nice cul-de-sac, come in there, one driveway, 2 houses, catty corner, and 1 in the middle, have 5 to 6 homes in there. It just seems like everyone's trying to maximize and cram as many units only for the benefit of the property owner and investment, for their return on investment. It's all at our expense. And none of our neighborhood likes it. And as elected officials, I really hope you guys are listening to people that actually live there. A Google Maps study, I travel to Target every day, my wife does. You don't go to Princeton. You go through Kipping and up Mountcastle. I go downtown. You go through Kipping and Mountcastle. So a lot of what we're hearing is just really biased towards this project, and it's all at our expense. So I hope you guys are listening to the people that vote.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Margaret Davis, and I live at 2216 Kipping Street here in Johnson City. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to the commission for your work for the citizens of this city. I'm here tonight to ask you to vote no to this ordinance. As a Washington County election commissioner, I am uniquely aware of the growing population in this area. Each month, I review voter registration cards from people moving here. I'm also aware of the growing need for affordable housing in Johnson City. It is important for the city to have a place for all those new residents to live, and of course, I want them to be voters. However, trying to squeeze in a 24-unit housing complex on Nave is not the solution. Our current neighborhood is a beautiful community, but it has its own challenges. Our neighborhood is a community without sidewalks, so that often means sharing spaces with vehicles, distracted speeding drivers, poor visibility at night, which increase the likelihood of collisions. Our neighborhood also has a Zillow Walk score based on pedestrian friendliness of 26 out of 100. I listened to your planners talk about the units. They'll have 2 available parking spaces, 11 additional spaces. Well, I'd like you to imagine a scenario, since we don't know who will be moving into these units, where we will have 24 families, each with 2 cars and children. But in my scenario, 11 of these families have teenagers who also have cars, which will undoubtedly take up the 11 additional spaces planned. And now, where will your visitors park when there's a housewarming, a birthday party, holiday gatherings? I suspect they will have to park on the street, as people do when there are gatherings. Do you really believe that adding a potential 59 cars in the mix of this current neighborhood, where cars currently used as an avoidance to drive on Princeton Road, would not increase noise, pedestrian risk, and just plain add chaos? Several years ago, as the secretary of Friendship Baptist Church, I was privileged to sit on the Weed and Seed, and I learned the term NIMBY. So I ask you to vote no, please, not in my backyard.
Thank you.
My name is Barbara O'Neill. I didn't intend to speak this evening, but I thought, well, I brought my neighbor, who does live on Kipping. And I live in Princeton Gardens. It's a fairly new area, as you probably know. The apartment complex, Princeton Greens, is right beside us. I wish I had the opportunity to go down Kipping and not have to pull out on Princeton, but I don't have that luxury. We are a circle. We're just, when I pull out, I can go down Princeton to Oakland or up Princeton. And I was just concerned because the traffic, sometimes I have to wait for a long time before I can get pulled out. And I thought, that's gonna create a whole lot more traffic. So if you do approve having this, I would recommend, you know, at least a stoplight there at Nave and Princeton. Perhaps that would help some. And also, everybody's gonna funnel into what I call Malfunction Junction up there. You know, Broyle Street, Princeton, it all comes together. And I would hope that sometime in the future, maybe you could take a look at doing something about that. Because if there's more people living down there and they don't go through Kipping, and that's probably why people do go through the neighborhood, they want to avoid that area. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission. My name is Ben Dutton. I live at 7 Cox Farm Court in Johnson City. I'm here to speak in favour of this development tonight as a citizen, someone who lives in reasonable proximity to this development. Living on Cox Farm Court with the similar circumstance of condominiums, actually out in front of us on Cox Farm, and working on Silverdale Drive. I walk my dog through Idlewild frequently, if not daily, and obviously working on Silverdale. I'm very familiar with traffic patterns. I can tell you, I rarely, if ever, cut through the neighbourhood in Idlewild because it is faster to go down Princeton and cut down Broyles if I want to go to Target. On my way to work, with the speed bumps there, it's actually faster for me to go around on Lakewood. There is no current, based on my experience, I would, what I can offer you is that the traffic report that's been presented tonight and staff's reports and comments are entirely consistent with my experience. There is no traffic problem in Idlewild. This development is not going to create a traffic problem in Idlewild, and this development, I think, respects pretty much every good planning principle that you'll find. It's exterior to the single-family neighborhood. If anything, it buffers it from Princeton. It's not interior to the neighborhood, so folks don't have to go. It's not lower density to higher density. That's the other way around. So it's the appropriate place for it. So Johnson City also needs housing of this type. We lag our sister communities, if you will, of similar size by providing multifamily. So from the city's perspective, I would urge you to support it. Thank you.
Hey guys, Virginia Guest, 2210 Lakeland Drive. Despite that the individuals that have spoke in regards to preferring or electing to have this into our neighborhood, they don't live in our neighborhood. They don't live here. They don't have anything to do with our neighborhood. So I really would appreciate if you would actually see the big picture as a small picture. Okay, these are lives and individuals that are in a neighborhood that live there every day. Okay, none of you guys live in our neighborhood. You don't walk your dog. You don't run. You don't see the kids playing in our neighborhood. We do. We want to keep it the way it is, despite that everybody seems to have a game plan of what they want to do with this property. But it's not what we want. And I would hope that since you are guys that are elected officials that want to do the best for the city, and we are a part of the city. We are a part of the city. We have individuals that are policemen, that are nurses, that are also teachers. Okay, these are people that take care of their neighborhood, that take care of the city of Johnson City. They want you to take care of us, the exact same way that we take care of you. So in regards to that, I want you to look at that picture, okay? These people work in the community. They are citizens of Johnson City that take care of Johnson City. They want you to take care of their neighborhood.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Norman Davis, and my wife and I live on Kipping Street there, and we've been there since April of 2015. And I recount a situation where Steve was my neighbor. We were on the street, and we just happened to be talking, and there was a vehicle that came down. and it seemed that if this individual was not really concerned about the calming strip. I mean, he hit it pretty quick. The week prior to our last meeting, I had an opportunity to look at traffic on our camera. And there was a vehicle that went by so fast that it was a blur. So the calming strips aren't really having much of an impact. And I'm speaking strictly from the impact of additional traffic. We're dealing with traffic as it is, traffic problems, if you will. This additional complex that they're proposing to build is only going to add to it. It's not going to be a situation that's going to get any better. And something that I wanted to ask, when a complex like this is being proposed, the fire department, police department, or the people that come and pick up the trash and so forth, do they have an opportunity to weigh in? Because I'm not seeing much space that's going to allow for a large fire truck to come in, or even the trash truck and so forth, to conveniently get in and out without creating a hassle. So if we have another perspective on this thing, I would appreciate some consideration from the standpoint of those who live in the area. Look at it from our point of view as opposed to outsiders that may have a different perspective. It's not a vested interest, if you will. So my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add a couple more questions or comments, please? Steve Hunt, 2217 Kipping. I realize you guys have done a lot of studies, a lot of work and so forth, and I know you're pulling out all the numbers and figures, but I had a couple quick questions. On the queuing study, did you factor in the effect of school buses and how that would affect your queuing results? Also, on the traffic studies, that represent just one day or 7 days, complete week? Because depending on what time of day or what day of the week perhaps, or maybe just in general, that could have a big effect on your numbers and the results, I think, and you must agree on that, I would think. And we've kind of worked our way around this whole thing, but we've never really addressed the parking issue, the safety issues, the exiting the street, all these things I listed off here. We just don't know. We really don't know. I know we're just talking about rezoning, but at the same time, we kind of know where this is intended to go. And we have a lot of questions about that. And just rezone it to R2 for a nice home. Those look great, but we don't know they're going to look like that. The point being is that we don't really know. And I think, Commissioner Brock, I think you initially made the statement about that there's some value in knowing what you have. And right now, we don't really know anything about this development. We're trying to create a development, right? But we really don't know. We don't know any of the particulars. We were focused on parking last time, and we couldn't even get that one resolved. So go with what you know. And if you don't know much, try to get it to R2. Well, a nice home to go in, which would fit into the neighborhood and keep everybody here happy. Well, this house.
Could I ask you a
Thank
question? Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
I've heard this a lot. Is parking on the street in that neighborhood a problem now?
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, I have another 5 minutes. Well, okay, up until recently, it has been at times, like at nighttime and on the weekend, because cars would park on both sides of the street. So going down through, in all honesty, was like a maze, going down through and even coming up. And then you throw in the speed bumps, which we really wanted, and that makes for jumps, like ski jumps. But now I notice within the past week, they've got signs up there saying no parking this block. And that covers all the way up from the corner, all the way up to the top of it. Don't know who instigated that. I just know it's been in about the last week that they've come in. So if you take that into account and you hold that steady, then that means there's no additional parking for that development at all. They can't park out there. So which way is it? Okay, that's good, unless you've got any more questions.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will close the public hearing. Any discussion or any motions?
I guess to the last comment with the no parking signs recently being put, the city put those up, correct?
Yes, we did, and that was in an effort to be proactive too.
Because I think in the last meeting, that was brought up about the parking, and so I just bring that up to say, the city's listening, we listen, and we take what you say seriously, and so that was a recommendation or a concern of the residents, existing residents, and so that was addressed, and that's why those signs are there.
You know, all neighborhoods have the issue with parking on the street. Some are worse than others. But it's us living inside of our neighborhoods who are, you know, the people who park on the street. And so they do park. I have it in my neighborhood, and we've got one particular street, and they park on both sides, and it's the same thing. We're trying to weave through these two cars. So, you know, I guess from a city standpoint, we could, you know, address parking in neighborhoods on streets to one side or the other. But I don't think people would like that, because you're parking in front of my house and you live across the street. So, it's a real difficult situation to solve. We just need the residents themselves to you know, work it out and solve.
I guess my point, Dave,
Yeah.
go with snow and cars are there, you can't add another 24.
Once the commission is deliberating, we probably need to keep it up here. Sorry.
It's okay.
No, go ahead.
We're just gonna.
A couple thoughts as I think about it. You know, we've certainly heard the neighbors, we've read the emails, we hear you tonight. I could recite many of the points, and we do take into consideration neighborhood comments. We also take into consideration that there is a property whose owner potentially wants to develop it, and they have a right to bring that request. Keep in mind, the city is not asking for this rezoning. There's a petitioner asking for this rezoning, and that is their right. And the question that we're being asked is the propriety of land use around that question. And so you've got a parcel that's already R5, it's got R2, it's got I1, and then there becomes this question, and I heard several people say, well, maybe R3, maybe R3. And so we have a plan right now in front of us. We know exactly what it is. It's 24 houses with 11 ancillary parking spots, driveways, and garages. 59 parking spots and 24 units. We know the buffers, there's no question about that. And my questions along the lines of by right development are not scare tactics. Please don't hear that. It's just to say, if a property owner wants to develop their property and they don't want to go through this process, what kinds of things could happen that take no consideration of your opinions? And we heard some of those, and some of them probably aren't viable, but some of them certainly are. And I heard the phrase NIMBY, and I don't remember, I guess Ms. Davis said it. NIMBY has become the single biggest contributor to housing unaffordability in our country. In fact, in California, it became so egregious that the solution was to eliminate single-family zoning entirely. Because they went from, I don't want anything in my backyard. That's why every house in California costs multiple millions of dollars to buy a brick ranch like any of us live in your neighborhood or mine, because they made it so difficult to build anything that then the sweeping corollary to fix it is just no holds barred. There isn't even single family zoning anymore. And that's not better. Okay, and so we're trying to balance here in a very unenviable way. I mean, be swell to just do what the room wants us to do. But we do have to look at a bigger picture. We have to look at a picture that we're 2,700 housing units short of what our community needs right now. we do have to look at employers and industry in our area who say we are recruiting people and they don't have anywhere to live for a month or 45 days. And then we're looking at a developer who comes in and says, I've got this idea and it deals with this parcel that's got 3 ridiculously different zones applied to it, and tries to harmonize that in a way that is not wholly inconsistent with the neighborhood around you. Now, I hear your traffic comments, but all of the cut-through traffic you use in the examples are your own cut-through traffic. I'm sitting at Mount Castle, I turn right, I go up Kipling because I don't want to go up to Princeton. I've never cut through your neighborhood until this came before us, and I live right across Mount Castle because I go Broyles to Princeton to get to Evergreen. I would never cut through the neighborhood to get to Evergreen, and your neighborhood is literally between my house and Evergreen. And so I would love nothing more to do than to just make a room full of people happy. But it wouldn't be the right thing to do for Johnson City. And so I make a motion to approve because I believe this is an appropriate land use decision.
I'll second that, but I did have a few other items that, I know the suggestion of R2 has been brought up several times, but also the notion of you know what you get. Well, just as a reminder, whether it's R2, R5, I, whatever, as far as the design of a single-family house versus multifamily, you still you don't know what you're going to get. It'll be a single family, but it could be cinder block or, metal roof or whatever you don't like. It could be that. I live in a neighborhood similar to yours. No sidewalks. It's a cut-through without speed humps through the cut-through. And I do cut through your neighborhood on the regular, but it's not down Nave. It's down Brown and Kipping. Kipping, now, I forget your name, but I kept trying to think, how is this a cut through? Nave to Mount Castle is not the shortest route, and a cut through is to get the shortest route, and that's Brown to Kipping to Mount Castle. In fact, it's less than 0.6 of a mile that route. It's almost right at a mile if you take Nave to Mount Castle. And you double the number of turns you have to make, you double the number of speed humps you have to go over. But you did make a good point that finally I realized, as far as the cut through in what you're thinking, is that the new residents on their way home or from Target would come up Kipping and turn on Idlewood and whatnot. But it's still, I can't determine which route they take, but for me, myself, the distance would be the same to just go up Brown, turn on Princeton, straighter, less turns, quicker route, same distance, but you're not going through the neighborhood. Again, don't know if that's how people would go, but I understand the cut through better as far as that goes. But yeah, I agree with Commissioner Wise on this one.
I'd like to share with you, I've been on the commission a long time, so we've had numerous rezoning requests over time, and some have been very easy to work with and make those decisions. Some have been very difficult. One of the more difficult ones was on Sundale and the apartments that went in behind the mall. And it was the same argument that you have here, that it's going to be a racetrack down Sundale, everybody's going to come down there, cut through to go to the mall. We moved here because it was R2 and we had our own space, but this blank piece of land was behind the people on the left side of Sundale going toward Liberty Bell for years and years and years. And then finally someone bought it and wanted to build, I don't remember, Joe, you may remember, is it 148 apartments in there? It's a lot.
It was mid-hundreds, I don't remember.
So those were real concerns. They were real fears that people had that their neighborhood, and they walk on Sundale and children play on Sundale. So really understand those things. But we wound up approving it, and I know many of us were called all sorts of things, and it was not, it wasn't a pleasant experience for anyone. One day, about 6 months ago. I was somewhere, and this lady came up to me and she said, "I owe you an apology." Well, I didn't know what it was about, but she said, "I'm so-and-so, and I live in North Hills, and I was one who really was so upset because y'all rezoned that for the apartments and the cut-through going to the mall." She said, "The traffic on Sundale is not bad. People don't come and cut through." But she said, "Do you know who does cut through?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I don't." She said, "I do." So from living in North Hills, I can get to the mall without having to get out on the main arteries there. So I thanked her for that. The buffers that have gone in for those apartments and everything seems to have congealed in a way that the neighborhood is whole. The apartments at the top of the neighborhood of Sundale, you know, their neighbors, their families, their children who go to school, their people who work probably in the same places that we all work. So I know there is fear out there. This is a rather small development, and I do believe the traffic studies, although you heard me ask a lot of questions, but you know, I have to understand them. Are they off plus or minus? Of course. But it's the best estimate we have that says, you know, it's not going to be a racetrack around here. We can add more speed bumps if that's what you want to do. We can, over time, you know, plan this neighborhood for sidewalks at some point in time as we, you know, look at capital improvements in our neighborhoods. But I personally believe, and again, I live in a neighborhood, so we all have, you know, our wants, likes, and dislikes about our neighborhoods, but we still have a great place to live around here. And I'm going to vote for it on second reading, to move it along to third. I don't know if the developer would be interested or willing to look at an R3, but we, you know, if staff would like to talk to them about that, that might be a good suggestion to do, to see, you know, that they could make it work with fewer units. But, I just want to, and one of the other points that's been brought up is property values. And, you know, I can assure you, your property values are not gonna go down because of some attractive townhomes on one lot in front of your neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, let's go. Anything else? Just for staff's benefit though, like on an R3, R4 question, we're talking about 24 is what they've asked for in this plan, and R3 would be 18. So we're talking about a difference of 6. I don't know, I don't know that really is a gain. All right, anything else?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes, I hadn't made a whole lot of comments during this time, but I wanted to save what I had to say for last. When we make decisions, we have to do our research and homework. I've done a lot of that. Done a whole lot of research and homework on this, more than I really have time to do, right? When making decisions, we got to know the short-term and long-term effects and consequences of the decisions we make. Decisions I make, I have to go home at night and get up in the morning and feel good about it, right? It's important that we as elected officials prioritize the needs, preferences, and well-being of our community. Stay true to our ideology and keep our promises. Not to be true to who we are before we got in the seat that we're sitting in. There's no way that I'm going to change who I am because I'm sitting at this table here. I'm going to be consistent. I do believe we need housing. We do. We need housing badly, and we need affordable workforce housing. I'm a strong advocate for that. Making informed, ethical, and representative decisions that serve the best interest for everyone. Here are my concerns. One of my major concerns is, yes, we need housing. We're presented with the appropriate land use for what's presented before us. Is it single family or multi-family use? I do believe that I'm on the side of it can be multifamily. But at what level? Is that R5, R4, R3? We need infill development. That's what we need in our city, and it needs to take place within the city limits rather than annexing something on the outside and making it high density. But the multifamily use that I support is more on the side of R3. And to Commissioner Wise's point, he said, we're looking at 24 units. I did the math, and if 24 units, that's what they're presenting, did the math, R3 would be 18. All right, that's 6 units. That's not a whole lot of units. And so I'm like, R3 versus 18 units versus 24 units. That's not a whole lot. And so I say all that to say this. What really is a deal breaker for me is the parking spaces available. You have a parking space available in front of every unit presented. You got 24 units and you have a parking space in front of the townhome. Garages these days aren't garages, they're used as storage facilities. 80% of households use their garages as storage facilities, not to park a car. I think it's about 78% or 80%. I believe if there were more parking spaces available in this development, it would satisfy a healthy compromise. And so R4, R3, regardless of what it is, it needs the accommodations to meet the demands of the development. In a development like this, you're going to need more parking, and each unit needs an additional parking space, because otherwise they're going to park on the street or in any other arteries. So I'm going to vote no on this, and so I'm not looking for applause. I'm not looking for.
Didn't you already vote yes? You voted yes at the
Well,
beginning of your remarks.
I said I would. I meant to say I would vote yes. I would vote yes. I'm on the fence, and it's more so on parking availability. That's what I meant to say. Sorry about that.
I guess.
So my vote is no, to clarify that.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse the public on any matter.
It's Robert's rule of,
I took the yes as in him saying, yes, he was going to make a statement.
oh, okay.
Yes.
Since he continued speaking after he said yes.
And that's exactly what I meant.
Mayor Fallon.
Continue to vote no, so.
Next.
Commission, your next order
Just a
of
second.
business.
I have an emergency phone call I need to go make, so I may or may not be, I'll be back at some point, but I'm going to let the vice mayor take over for a few
Okay.
minutes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The next item for consideration is ordinance 4886-24. This is the second reading and public hearing. It's an ordinance to suspend Title 8, Chapter 1, Section 102 of the Code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee. We have Assistant City Manager Willis to present on this.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So this suspension would allow the sale and consumption of beer for the Meet the Mountains Festival to be held on August 9th and August 10th. So no changes since first reading.
And it's public hearing.
At this time, I'm going to open the floor up for a public hearing. Seeing that there are none, I'm going to close the floor for public hearing.
Move approval.
Ms. Laus, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Commission, the next order of business is ordinances under third reading. We're starting with 9.1. This is ordinance 4880-24. This is the third reading. An ordinance to change the property tax rate date, allow partial payment of property tax, and change delinquency dates.
There have been no changes.
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. Laus, will you please call the roll?
Now, just before we call the roll, I'll offer this one comment. Some things we've been able to do as city government that allow us to standardize operations. This is an example of that, mirroring the county tax collection. Other things that we're trying to do involve the charter change that's being put on the ballot in August. The objective in both is the same, to remove points of confusion and disconnection between how we vote and pay taxes in the county versus the city, the county school board, the city school board. And so I appreciate staff's effort to move this along in a way that allows us to take some of the variability out of the interaction for taxpayers, and I think it's appreciated by them as well.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
Next order of business is an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee by changing from R2 district to RP2 for property located on Browns Mill Road. And we have Riley Putney here on this one. Are you kept filling in for her?
You demoted me earlier, so with her first act, she said, "You do my item."
No,
Dave."
that
She
was
went-
me misspeaking, not anything of the,
It
other
was
than that.
all in fun.
Have there been any changes?
There have been no changes,
Move
sir.
approval.
The pickleball complex, right?
Yeah.
Second.
She good. All right, Ms. Laus, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
The next item of business is item 9.3. This is an annexation. It's an owner consent annexation on Whitehead, is known as a Whitehead annexation. It's to conduct a public hearing on the proposed voluntary annexation of approximately 15.29 acres along Boones Creek Road and Old Boones Creek Road. And Whitney Hodges is here on this item.
So there are three actions that are with this item. I'm not going to take up a lot of time to present it, but if you have questions, as I like to say, Brock did it well, as I go through these slides to get where we are. But where we are in the annexation is this is a public hearing for the annexation. So that will need to be the first action that you take items on. The plan of services has been in your packet, as well as the cost benefit analysis. The only thing I really want to update you on is kind of where we are when it comes to who we have notified and how we have notified. Because there was a state law change that takes effect on July 1, we went ahead and did some modifications to how we notify for this one. So one of the things was that we did send out notifications by mail so that people were notified of the hearing. We did not get our signs in time, but this property was posted as it's supposed to be posted for the current statute. But those signs are not as tall as the next, in July that they will be. And then we published this notification 21 days instead of 15. So those are the big three changes, but everything else is the same for the annexation. Staff would recommend approval of the annexation, as well as approval of the zoning assignments that will be read in the next one as well.
Move approval.
Second.
It's a public hearing.
Oh, public hearing.
Should be sure.
On third?
Steve,
It's a public hearing for the annexation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not marked that way on the, oh, I guess it is.
Yeah,
That's
and there'll be a
where it's
public
hearing.
Yeah, there's a public
Okay.
hearing for the zoning is moved to the third reading.
Okay.
When it's an annexation.
We'll open that up. At this time, we'll open up the floor for public hearing. Seeing there is no one, we'll close the floor for public hearing. Is there a motion on the floor?
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. Laus, please call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
And as Ms. Hodges said, item number 4 is connected to this one as well. This is ordinance number 4883-24. This is the third and final reading and also the public hearing.
Also the public hearing.
It's an ordinance assigning planned business district and planned residential to approximately 15.29 acres located along Boones Creek Road and Old Boones Creek Road. Any changes?
No changes.
Public hearing.
All right, at this time, we'll open the floor up for public hearing. Seeing there is no one, we'll close the floor for public hearing.
Move approval.
Second.
Ms. Laus, please call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
The last item is item 9.5, and this is to consider approval of a concept plan for Star Fitness Center located on Boones Creek Road.
So the concept plan was read by the planning commission last month, and they approved the concept plan for this. This is only for the 2-acre parcel that faces Boones Creek Road. Because these are both an RP or a PB, this one would be PB, they do require a concept plan, so the back half, when it decides to develop, will also need a concept plan before it can move forward. The concept plan meets the requirements, that there's a couple of things that we've added as conditions, more so that for site plan approval, but we would recommend to approve.
Move approval.
Ms. Laus, please call the roll.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Murphy?
Yes.
And that concludes the formal part of our meeting.
All righty, thank you, Manager Ball, staff. Thank you, attendance of this meeting on tonight. Thank you for spending a little longer time than usual. Before we close, I'll give each commissioner an opportunity to share, and I'll start with Commissioner Joe Wise. You have anything you want to share before we close?
No, sir.
No, sir? Okay. Commissioner Brock?
Of course. It's Blue Plum this weekend.
Yeah.
So we all have best wishes for no rain. The Ferris wheel was going up today, so I'm sure that will bring a lot of excitement. We encourage all our citizens to get down and to King Commons as the base for Blue Plum this year. And then this past Tuesday night, all the commission was over at the ballpark when we raised the big flag on Tannery Knobs. And just heard a lot of good stuff about that.
And we left before the 8th inning.
And we left before the 8th inning, yes. And we were, and the Doughboys were ahead when we left.
It all looked good when we left.
It does.
Nothing to add.
And I would just, as a reminder, remind the commission that we have a special meeting next week, June 13th at 1:30, and that will be legally noticed
All righty.
For budget.
for budget, second hearing of the budget.
And I will be here for the 1:30 meeting, but then I'll have to leave and call in for the workshop because I have to be in Lenore City at 5.
Thank you, sir.
So we have a workshop that afternoon after that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? All hearts and minds clear. At this time, we